Cool Figure TV. The dictator, Trump, has gone too far. The world knows it, and everybody can see the fall of America is here. Before we get into that, be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button. You in the house of revolution. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all. Well, cold-blooded murder. Everybody's looking at the video. They disarmed him and killed them. Let's get right into the contents.
CNN's Tom Foreman is here to walk us through what we're hearing from federal officials, but also what the videos show, including the new videos, because what they are saying and what the videos are showing are not always the same thing, Tom.
Yeah, very much. I want to start with the very first statement made by the Trump administration in the aftermath of this shooting. It was a tweet by the Department of Homeland Security showing a firearm on what appears to be the seat of a car. And the tweet reads, an individual approached U.S. Border Patrol officers with a 9mm semi-automatic handgun seen here. You see the picture behind it there. This looks like a situation where an individual wanted to do maximum damage and massacre law enforcement. Now we have this new angle of the video that's just been cleared by CNN, and it shows the lead up to this deadly altercation. This is what I want you to take a look at. Of course, this is
we're making this freezing.
All right. Things to note. As it begins, you see Pretty out there in the middle of the street. He shows up right in this area here. You start seeing him, and he is at one point using his camera. There he is, right there, and he's pointing to traffic, sort of waving traffic through. At some moment here, you see that law enforcement approaches him, and he backs away as they start moving up on him. He is not trying to move toward them. He's backing away. Then you're going to see one of these officers approach a woman near him and really forcefully shove her to the ground right there. And Pretty starts rushing over toward her. Now, they're both getting pepper sprayed at this point. He gets grabbed, and he's taken over to the ground here. I'll point out this is about 15 seconds from when officers turned to him. He's now on the ground. They are on top of him. The officers are all around. He does not appear to have a weapon in his hand. He doesn't brandish anything. He doesn't seem to do anything. And then all of a sudden you see one agent in the middle there. Look, he turns away, and that's when the shooting begins. One shot followed by, in our analysis, 9 other shots there. We heard from Border Patrol Chief Greg Bovino. He was asked at what point Pretty brandished a weapon in all of this. This was his answer.
Ali, this situation again is evolving. This situation is under investigation. Those facts will come to light.
This is important because an important detail, because concealed carry is legal. We know from local officials Pretty had a permit to carry a weapon, and law enforcement analysts here on CNN have raised questions as to why the picture of this gun that DHS shared online was shown on the seat of a car and not in the scene where Pretty was shot. And we now have an answer. CNN analysis shows, if you watch all those videos carefully, you see a federal agent right there who appears to be removing a gun. This is very critical to remember.
That's cold-blooded murder. But they've been doing this. This is what they do. Now they had the video. The officer removed the gun from his back. Then the other officer seen the other officer take the gun and move away and decided to kill him. They no longer, and I'm going to show the videos, they're all getting confronted. The ICE agent's not. Their boss is getting confronted, and they don't know what to say because the lie has fallen apart this quick. He was executed in cold-blooded murder. They still have both his hands, and they still have him on his back. He never reached for no weapon. And now we know the officer, one officer had already taken the weapon. It's in his hand. Then they going to kill him.
Remember, that piece of video you're seeing right there is happening about a second or maybe slightly less than a second before the shooting begins. Now, it is just video. We have to look at it. There will be a lot of questions here, but that's the reason people say you have to have a truly impartial and fair investigation here, because if he removed the gun before all this shooting broke out, then why is this man now dead? It's really quite a remarkable series of events all coming together here, but almost all of them, Aaron, contradict the story that came out of the Trump administration early on today.
And let's go now to our senior law enforcement analyst, Andrew McCabe, also the former deputy director of the FBI. So, Director McCabe, what do you see in all of this so far from the information that we have, from the video you've watched, from the responses we've gotten from DHS and from Mr. Bavino?
Well, I mean, obviously, Aaron, at the core of it, you have an unbelievable tragedy where it appears that a potentially unarmed person was essentially assassinated by
Not even
horrible
Fox
law
News.
enforcement.
Even Fox News is hot. Why? Because they can no longer say, they the ones saying armed protesters, you can fight a tyrannical government. You can show up to protest anywhere, which they show up with AR-15s and assault rifles. So they caught in their own rhetoric. Now they even saying, damn, you can't strip a gun off a U.S. citizen, take his gun, then gun him down, because even they're not that dumb. They know it will happen to them. The Democratic corrupt politicians who are in the bought and paid for by the small hats will absolutely murder these people in cold blood like they've been doing. They ain't just been Republicans killing us in the street. That's another lie that needs to stop. I keep telling people this: when an officer gunned down a black man, they act like we know that's a card-carrying Republican. Hell no, it's been a bunch of Democratic officers gunning black people down too like this, and they just getting away with it. Under the banner, oh, that's a white guy. What? Is he a Democrat? So now the Republicans, now that a guy done been disarmed and then gunned down, now even Fox News is saying, well, wait a minute. Yeah. Because now they understand that it's a group of people running this country, and it's a group of people making, remember who trained these officers? The Israeli self-defense, the Israeli Defense Forces.
Tactics that dramatically escalated the situation. But there are so many questions here at the absolute core of lethal force training in the FBI Academy, in the academy at Glencoe, Georgia, where DHS agents, ICE agents, Border Patrol folks go through. You are taught from the very beginning that if you use your weapon, you have to be able to, after the fact, articulate exactly why you perceived an imminent threat.
In this line, this is a Democratic bigot right here. You can't see they playing politics. This bastard know goddamn well the FBI been gunning us down all over this country too. Gunning us down, mistreating us, abusing black people, mistreating black people. Now he act like under Trump, this has just gotten out of hand. That's why we'll not let these bastards like Andrew McCabe get up here and just look at our face and tell us these lies. Like he's been an FBI agent holding the law. You have to justify why you shoot somebody. They ain't never justify why they shoot. Ain't no damn well every officer can say I feel for my life. Now these people are shook because they're not used to this happening to them. Now they want to get to the bottom of this. Well, how the hell can an officer just, what you mean? It's plenty of time black people didn't have no gun. The officer just said I thought he had one. He reached for something. And then they justified the murder. Now, this white guy, they done him wrong. He had a weapon on him. And they still see how it's unjust to take his weapon off of him and then murder him. Good. Now we see they understand how criminalistic this society is. But I'm not one dumb enough to say it's just Trump. No, every American president has been a fucking dictator. And that's been Trump just going farther than any president has ever went in their life. And guess what? They can't stop him unless they arrest him. You cannot stop a U.S. president unless he is arrested by the military. He, as a sitting president, can't no police department, can't no FBI, nobody. Only the U.S. military can step in. Why would they step in when he done bribed them? He just told them they finna get $1.some trillion. He bribed all the generals off. They ain't finna do shit. That's when the Civil War gonna come into play. That's a fact.
Death or serious bodily injury. And so the question now is, when are we going to hear that articulation? What is the reason that these officers, or a single officer, we don't know how many people shot, believed they were in imminent threat of death by this person who was, by every video we've seen.
No. Black people understand that no officer has to be in danger to kill. We've been saying this. America love violence, and now they just get a taste of their own violence. Like Michael said, the chickens coming home to roost. For the Democrats, they ain't shot. They're scared to death. Yeah, because Trump unleashing hell on them. He's a dictator. But they should have treated us right. They should have gave us our red break. He wouldn't be in there if the Democrats wouldn't kissing up. Remember, they kissing Israel ass. Didn't want to stop the war in Ukraine. Want to say that boys can be girls. That's why you see Trump in office. Never forget that. It's their failed policies. The reason that man is a motherfucking office. So we ain't gonna let them just sit here. Say, what happened to America? You part of the damn problem. You part of the problem. These people ain't getting back in motherfucking power. No, it's the end of all of them. None of them are the motherfucking solution. That's just a fact. It wouldn't have been no better had they been in power. He just said this man done went insane with this second presidency. And it's a fact. Ground. Anywhere in the world, if you had this in video happening in Russia, the U.S. would sanction Russia. If a cop grabbed a dude, took his gun out off of him and gunned him down, and we seen a video in Russia, they sanction. Let this happen in China, sanction. Anyway, Venezuela. Imagine you send a video like this in Iran. Are you kidding me? They getting sanctioned, and we're gonna bomb them the next day. Trump gonna threaten the hell out of them. But only in America can these thugs do this live on TV, and then they sitting here trying to justify it. They wouldn't let nobody in the world justify no shit like this.
With anywhere from 4 to 5 officers on top of him at the same time. Nowhere in these videos do you see a weapon in this man's
all in
hand.
the problem.
And so while Commander Bovino's statement was very artfully written, yes, they encountered someone who had a gun. It is not clear that that man ever presented the gun, brandished the gun, pointed the gun at anyone, threatened to harm any of these officers. So what's the excuse for having to use lethal force here? We have no idea.
No, and in fact, they were quick to, post a picture of the gun, which they removed from the crime scene. They put in a car. They said, look at these extra magazines. There was some deplorable act that he was prepared to commit, but they've never actually even said that he did brandish it. And obviously there's no video evidence that he did any such thing. He did have a permit to carry it. He was clearly there. We hear all the whistles on that one video, right? The whistles people do when they're warning of ICE. He was there trying to protect, it appears, a woman that they pushed over. So, Director McCabe, I'm just curious, though, if there is no investigation, which at this point doesn't appear that there are going to be any indications they're saying case closed and sealed, right? And they don't give access to the state for an investigation, which again, that would be surprising if they did. They didn't do it with Renee Nicole Good. Then what happens here?
Nothing happens here. Just like nothing happened after the killing of Renee Good. In fact, so what we have seen, Aaron, is now we have a very common set of circumstances. We know what the game plan is for the White House and DHS. Immediately after the event, they go to the media and they put out a version of events that paints the victim as a domestic terrorist. It's happened to Renee Good. They then said Renee Good's wife was also a domestic terrorist, which of course neither of them are.
Now, once again, I got to sit here and say, white America, this is a white America. He was the FBI, one of the highest ranking members of the FBI. You see what he doing? Saying Trump. Immediately, you see, try to paint the victim as a domestic terrorist. Brother, you and law enforcement, after y'all have gunned us down, have immediately, even a vigilante punk, who, like George Zimmerman gunned down Trayvon Martin, y'all immediately start talking about marijuana records and if the husband is with the wife, y'all immediately start trying to tar and paint a bad picture of the black person who has been gunned down. Now you see how I feel, white nigga? Now you see how I feel for when one of y'all get gunned down, this system that you've created immediately say, hey, they a white nigga, they a terrorist, they Antifa, they a communist. Meaning once people hear that, it's over. You don't get no sympathy. You help create those conditions. That's why I won't let the Democrats. I won't let them get away with this. Yes, I'm gonna repeat, it was wrong for them to do that to that man. But I'm gonna remind these type of individuals, do you think we stupid? You part of the reason why they can get away with that type of shit, because you allowed it to happen to us for so long, and you rose up the ladder in the FBI. If this dude gave a fuck about the government doing that, he would have been resigned because he knew what was going on. But now, like I said, the chickens coming home to roost, and their ass is grass. And if you are a communist, if you Antifa, if you are a white nigga, they own your ass. That's just a fact.
Now, immediately they say the same thing about this man. And so that's absolutely contrary to any effort to stage a legitimate investigation. You would never have high-ranking officials from the agency involved going out to the public prejudging it, but that's what's happened in every one of these cases. In the Renee Good case, you actually had the Deputy Attorney General of the United States of America came out on social media, a day after the event, and said there will be no investigation, there was no wrongdoing, there's nothing to investigate here. Essentially offered him a pardon from any accountability for this.
China,
and I can tell you that
for this shit.
The other officers—
China should sanction the U.S. That's what China got to stop playing games. Russia can't do it because they can't financially sanction the U.S. They don't have the paper. China can. That's what exactly. China got to come out and slap sanctions on these people. Same shit the U.S. do. China got to use their economic power to start sanctioning the U.S. government for this type of shit. You want to hurt them? Sanction their ass. That's where they're going to hurt. You hit them in their pocket. These bastards going to understand that. China got to start sanctioning them. Tit for tat. And go to the UN. This is human and civil rights. Use all the words they use when they going after China. China got to learn to play the same game to bring these people down.
On the ground in Minneapolis, in Maine, in Chicago, wherever they may be deployed, they hear this loud and clear. And the signal they get is, do whatever you want. There will be no accountability. You can be as violent as you want. You can provoke as many conflicts as you want, as we've seen happen in this case.
FBI
and there will be no accountability.
Been training officers to do. You've been training these Gestapo thugs to do this to us for so long. Now you on the outside of the government. You scared to death now because you ain't in power. Now the white niggas is scared to death now because they understand. See, they didn't think. They never thought the day they was going to feel the brunt of the Frankenstein they created. This is Dave Frankenstein. They created this monster. And that you want to know why they scared? Because they understand what this monster will do to people who not in the good graces of this monster. Strip your gun, gun you down, and go on TV and say you were a horrible person, you a thug. Like, wow, they thought that was on reserve for us. No, they will destroy your life, shame you. Then they go to the man's life, man, seemed like a pretty decent guy. But they got to go dig that up because they immediately came out, made you think this man was a terrorist who tried to kill police officers.
Accountability. And people should be very, very concerned about that. Anytime there's a law enforcement shooting of any type, there should be a fair, unbiased investigation. That is not happening.
I look at it. When has it ever happened? When has it ever been a fair, unbiased investigation? When? Never. That's one of the biggest problems we have. But guess what, white nigga? We put y'all in power. Y'all marched the power off of George Floyd. We gave y'all the House. We gave y'all the Senate. And we put Biden, decrepit old ass, back into that presidency. And y'all gave us nothing. Y'all say, oh, they keep on filibustering. We're like, man, y'all got laws y'all can pass to end the filibuster. That wouldn't be right. It wouldn't be right to do that. See, it wouldn't be right now. See? Is it right what Trump doing? Huh? To your ass now. He killing you all over the country. We told you to change some laws so we wouldn't be getting gunned down, and there was nothing you can do. Because you didn't give a fuck because it was us. But now, white nigga, y'all up in arms, everybody pissed. This can happen to anybody. No, that's the one thing you said that was true. Now, finally, this can happen to anybody. Because at first, it just can happen to us. But now, white nigga, your ass is up to bat. It's your time now to feel the brunt of the motherfucker you created. I tell you this too. Y'all want to see the faces. For what? I mean, you know who ain't said, let me see the faces of these people, black people, because we don't give a damn. We don't know who under there, racist bastards. I haven't heard no black people except D.L. Hughley and them talking about, let me see the faces. Well, we don't give a shit who under there. They do. Who are you? Why would you do this? They can't believe that is happening to them. I can. The hell, this is America. You can't believe it's violent.
The basis of it too, and you talk about the lack of training and professionalism that may have been on display here when you're surrounded by that many people,
training.
right? I mean, when regular
Nah,
people
they
get
were
put into
trained
a
by the
scrum, you can
IDF.
understand all of the not knowing what's going on, right? But these aren't regular people. These are supposed to be trained law enforcement who know exactly what they're doing in situations like this, right? But that's not what we saw. So, you know,
Not at all.
yeah. So then, I mean, is it possible then that we would look in the case of Renee Nicole Good? We know the name of the individual who shot her. We know they chose not to do an investigation to find out exactly what happened, right? But we know. But in this case, we may never actually even know because it's unclear in that scrum who shot or how many people shot. The only thing we know for sure is that Alex Priddy, who was killed, was not one of the people who shot.
That's absolutely right. And there's no indication that we'll ever get to the bottom of this. Because, you know, as I've said, the administration has proven in all prior events that they are perfectly comfortable going out and deliberately misleading the public as to what's happening on the ground in Minneapolis. Convicting people for domestic terrorism before they've ever been presented a single piece of evidence. How about the photograph of Nakima Anderson, who the White House admitted they intentionally altered the photograph to make her look
Right, to make her look
worse
like
at
she
the
was
moment of her
crying.
arrest.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. We've never seen this from any other administration that I'm familiar with at any other time in our history. We've never seen this level of violent conduct by law enforcement against the citizenry be completely ignored and swept under the rug by the administration. It should be troubling to every American, no matter where you are on the political spectrum. You should not be comfortable watching public servants act like this and commit these acts of violence.
Now, this video is going to show y'all how bad it is for Trump and those criminals.
As we continue to cover the fallout of the second brutal murder of an American citizen in Minneapolis at the hands of the Trump regime, something very interesting happened this morning.
Second Amendment, Fox News. Now, this lady right here, they know damn well they cannot go along with them taking a gun from a legal gun owner. Remember, you have the right to arm yourselves from enemies, foreign and domestic. You got to stand up to tyrannical governments. That's the one thing that the white right live by. You keep your gun. And if the government is out of hand, you stand up for yourself. That's what this guy was doing. So now Fox News is pissed because if they allow this, that's the end of their good guys with guns hustle.
On Donald Trump's favorite TV network, which should absolutely terrify him. MAGA Fox News / Fox Business host Maria Bartiromo, one of the biggest Trump supporters in the Fox orbit, is freaking out and losing her shit, not just on Republican members of Congress like James Comer, but Trump administration officials like FBI Director Kash Patel pushing back on the Trump administration and the Republican regarding this murder. And when you lose Maria Bartiromo, you've definitely lost the American people. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, folks, we have several clips to play here, and I want to start with Maria Bartiromo engaging with James Comer, the Republican leader of the House Oversight Committee, and then I've got several clips to show you from a slightly earlier interview this morning with FBI Director Kash Patel. But let's start with Bartiromo and Comer.
Another individual is dead at the hands of Border Patrol. let's be clear. We do not know if there was any pushback from this individual who was armed. We do not have evidence that he was waving a gun, doing anything to threaten Border Patrol. He had his phone and he was shooting. He was viewing and recording the incident. That's what he was doing, recording the incident. Mm-hmm. What is your reaction? And you are an elected official. What can you do about it?
Well, look, I don't think there's any question a majority of Americans want President Trump and ICE to go in and apprehend the.
Just want to note something here. Do you hear how outraged she is? Do you hear how panicked she is? I don't know if it's because she's panicked about the political consequences for her political party, or if it's because she is deeply, actually personally touched by this. She's offended by this. She's outraged by this on a personal level, or a combination thereof. But she's pushing back in ways that very few MAGA Fox hosts actually will. And quite frankly, even the allegedly straight news Fox hosts like Dana Perino wouldn't push back like this. And also note how panicked James Comer is. He's trying to walk a fine line. He knows ICE fucked up. He knows Border Patrol fucked up. He knows this is a murder. He knows that Republicans are getting their asses kicked in the court of public opinion about this, but he's also terrified of Trump. So that's why he's beginning with the platitude. Well, I think the majority of Americans really support Donald Trump.
Criminal illegals. That's what President Trump campaigned on, and he's doing exactly what he said. I look at what happened in Minneapolis versus what happened in Washington, D.C. When President Trump sent the National Guard into Washington, D.C., the mayor, Muriel Bowser, supported that. She worked, her local law enforcement worked with the president, and in a short period of time, they have really been successful in reducing the amount of crime in Washington, D.C. That was a big success. Fast forward to where we are in Minneapolis. We have a governor, an attorney general, and a mayor of Minneapolis who are getting people jacked up, trying to get them, convinced that this is, some type of illegal raid, that all their lives are threatened, and they've got all these white liberals coming in, trying to run over ICE, trying to, spray them and do everything to disrupt. And
yeah. So again, you hear the stammer. I mean, Comer's an idiot anyway, who should be made fun of for the rest of his fucking life. But he's panicked here, and he's trying to flip the script. It's actually liberals. It's white liberals. And notice how, again, that shot across the bow at Renee Good, the first American citizen murdered by the Trump regime in the streets of Minneapolis. They're trying to run people over. That's not what happened, asshole. Now let's turn to Maria Bartiromo's interview with FBI Director Kash Patel. And she also lets Patel have it.
And I know that this is a DHS investigation, but there is outrage across the country that there is another killing. Someone is dead at the hands of Border Patrol. What can you tell us?
Great to be with you, Maria. And look, Secretary Noem stated it perfectly. You do not get to attack law enforcement officials in this country without any repercussions. You do not get to do that in Minnesota, LA, or anywhere else. And the interagency is leading the charge out there. We've already arrested with the interagency those that violated the FACE Act and impeded a peaceful prayer in church. We've already just last night arrested 4 more individuals involved in the damage of government property that we saw the videos of online. We've arrested other individuals who've made threats to law enforcement online. So we are not messing around. It doesn't have to be in person. If you threaten law enforcement officials or civilians, we are going to come find you.
That has nothing to do with the murder of Alex Preddy.
And as for this latest shooting, yes, DHS and HSI are the lead, and the FBI is processing the physical evidence. So we're in possession of the firearm, which is going to go to our laboratory. But as Secretary Noem said, no one who wants to be peaceful shows up at a protest with a firearm that is loaded with 2 full magazines.
There's nothing about that said anywhere. There's no, these fucking assholes who have said for years, the Second Amendment shall not be infringed, and we gotta protect ourselves from a tyrannical government. It don't matter. You don't get to tell me, Uncle Sam, how many magazines I can have. Blah, 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 blah. These people said that shit. And by the way, the hypocrisy of MAGA on the Second Amendment has been explored to hell and back in the past 24 hours. It is truly, truly stunning to see them walk it back. They don't give a fuck about the Second Amendment. They don't give a fuck about the right to bear arms. They don't care about any of that. They want guns to kill liberals, but they don't think liberals can have guns for any reason. And again, Maria Bartiromo, to her credit, pushes back on this shit.
Charge to arrest those.
But how was he threatening Border Patrol? You've collected the evidence, you said, right? You have the handgun in your possession?
That's right.
And how was he using that handgun in terms of threatening Border Patrol?
He wasn't. The gun was holstered in a small of back holster on his waistband. He had a phone in his hand. He had his free hand. He wasn't reaching for his gun. He was pepper sprayed before he went to the ground. He was surrounded by 7 ICE/Border Patrol agents. And we just reviewed the footage. Go back to my most recent video. The footage has been stabilized. It's been slowed down. It's been zoomed in. One Border Patrol agent identifies the gun in Preddy's holster, rips the gun out of Preddy's holster, runs away from Preddy to put distance between Preddy and the agents and the gun. The other agent in green sees this happen, sees the gun, sees his colleague grab the gun. Preddy's not reaching for it. Preddy's on his knees, hands in front. Sees his colleague successfully disarm Preddy from the holster, run away. Then he pulls out his gun and shoots Preddy in the back. Clear cut, black and white. It was murder.
What was the threat? He had his camera, right? He was filming it.
That's something that I will let the DHS and the prosecutors, because they are the ones investigating that case. I don't.
Do you hear this shit? He's like, you can't go around threatening law enforcement agents with a gun. Okay, well, how is he doing that? Well, I mean, DHS has to explain that one. I don't know.
I want to stylize that evidence, but I trust the men and women on the ground who are trained professionals to only use it when it's absolutely necessary. And I trust Secretary Noem's leadership and DHS and HSI to do.
So again, Kash Patel is regurgitating Noem's propaganda, DHS propaganda, but when pressed by a MAGA Fox News host, we'll explain it. You're indicating that he was threatening law enforcement with a gun. How was he doing that? You can see Kash Patel in real time go, oh, shit. You're going to have to talk to them.
But it's not stopping. People are mad at ICE and want Border Patrol to stop. You saw what's happening right now in Minneapolis. People are protesting in the streets, pushing Border Patrol out. How will this end?
This will end thanks to President Trump's brilliant leadership to always back the blue. Law enforcement.
He doesn't back the blue. Again, this is situational. If he backed the blue, he would be celebrating the Capitol Police that successfully defended the Capitol against his violent insurrectionist mob on January 6th, instead of mass pardoning the hundreds of cop beaters. Donald Trump, again, guys, it is outrageous because people are dying as a consequence, but please understand this is not a matter of opinion. It's a matter of fact. MAGA is the most openly unprincipled and hypocritical movement in modern American history. They care about nothing other than owning the libs. They don't give a shit about the Second Amendment in principle. They don't care about law enforcement in principle. They don't care about small government in principle. They care about nothing. It's whatever they can pick up to own the libs, even if they themselves suffer in the process. That's what they care about.
How much of this has to do with some of the rhetoric, in your view? Just 2 weeks ago, the governor, Tim Walz, told residents to get their phones and start filming whatever is happening and when they see Border Patrol. Listen to this. This is just 2 weeks ago from Governor Tim Walz. Watch.
And Kash Patel goes on, we're going to skip the Walz part because, again, it's just about use your phones to record. That you have every right to do that. Any person has the right to film and monitor law enforcement. You just do. Now, you don't need to be getting in their faces. You don't need to be interceding or disrupting. That could, especially in today's age, get you killed. But if you see law enforcement conducting law enforcement operations, you have every right to take out your phone and film it. And they can't do anything about it legally.
Your reaction?
I think that type of rhetoric is exactly what's leading to violence against law enforcement that is totally baseless and unnecessary.
I think calling on people to monitor a rogue law enforcement organ peacefully, exercising their rights to monitor, to film, to record law enforcement, I think that's the thing that's contributing to the violence. These people are not serious at all.
I mean, thousands of people are marching through Minneapolis. They are targeting the Border Patrol. I mean, it feels like the rhetoric and the protesting is only ramping up. What is your advice to the people right now who are outraged that this is a second killing at the hands of Border Patrol in 2 weeks?
As Christy said, you cannot bring a firearm loaded with multiple magazines to any sort of protest that you want.
You can. You have it. He had a right to open carry in Minnesota, in Minneapolis. Minneapolis law permits him. There's no law that I'm aware of. Maybe we should have peace go back on, which says, hey, you cannot legally bring a gun to some sort of public engagement, public protest. Now, maybe it's unwise. Maybe it's unwise, but it's not illegal. He doesn't give a shit about that.
That's simple. You don't have that right to break the law and incite violence.
What law did he break and how did he incite violence? He had the right to carry the gun. And I'm going to close with this. Maria Bartiromo, again, she's panicked. She's freaking out either because she understands the political consequences or because she recognizes on a deep personal level that Trump and the Trump administration and Kash Patel and Kristi Noem and Tom Homan and Bambino, the little mini Nazi, as I call him, that they all fucked up and murdered an American citizen. But she begs Kash Patel to get the shit together.
I mean, Director, somehow you've got to get together with the president's detractors, whether it is on the Democrat side or not, to ensure that we don't have mistakes like we've been seeing, so that we are actually seeing what you're talking about, taking down people who deserve it and not, in fact, getting people who are in the middle of fire and in the middle of these operations. Why is it that everything you've just said, the Democrats do not agree?
It's not just the Democrats. A majority of America. I'm telling you, you saw the polls about Renee Good. I'm confident of very little in politics to make total predictions because it's the most complicated field in existence for all intents and purposes. Politics and religion are incredibly complicated. You make very few predictions, but one thing I am willing to bet on is that the polling for Trump and ICE and immigration are going to be disastrous once the polls take into account what happened to Alex Preddy. It's not just the other half of this country. It's not just the other side. It's a majority of Americans, many of whom supported Trump. They're losing. They're not holding their own. It's not a difficult fight. In the court of public opinion, in the court of public polling, they are getting their asses kicked. They're getting curb stomped on the messaging and public opinion war over this. They are losing.
In terms of the president's agenda?
Well, the Democrats are just upset that it was President Trump that delivered this historic year in law enforcement.
Again, he doesn't even address anything. She's asking like, hey, listen, and notice how she said, you guys made a mistake. So Maria Bartiromo gave the game away right there. As much as it pains her to admit it, she knows Trump was wrong. The Trump administration was wrong. ICE was wrong. Border Patrol was wrong. Kristi Noem is wrong. Kash Patel is wrong. They're the bad guys here. And Alex Preddy was a victim, that he did not deserve to die, that law enforcement fucked up. They're the villains of the story, this specific story at the very least. And Alex Preddy was the victim. She knows that. She just communicated that. And Kash Patel doesn't want to address it. Well, Donald Trump, he gave a historic win. He's just got a huge penis and everybody loves a six-pack too. Like, he's just wanted, like, he's so muscular and like he's handsome. Like all the ladies love him and also the stamina. Like this guy's not even serious. He's a loser. Kash Patel is a loser. And in a more just world, when a Democrat wins in 2028, all these motherfuckers will be in jail for the rest of their lives. So when you lose Maria Bartiromo, that should absolutely terrify Trump. But we'll see what happens. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.
And we see everything that's going on. They show the shooting. They show what Trump is saying. They show protesters. And they also interview local people. Let me show you guys some of this.
I was saying they didn't give him a chance to get on the ground. They just started throwing him on, manhandling him, and then just threw him on the ground and just shot him.
Kidding me, dude. And it's actually pretty obvious, at least to me and to really anyone watching. And the reason why I'm showing you from different points of view around the world, again, this is the Korean point of view, is that in the USA, the Trump people will gaslight you, or if you hang out in MAGA circles or look at Fox News, these kind of things, and you read some of these comments, they're just like completely whacked out. But when you take it in the international perspective, when I mean, people aren't really Republican or Democrat in other countries. It's just not like that. We can just see what's happening, from an objective point of view. And it's pretty obvious the Trump people are lying. And there's no other way to put it. Because essentially when you see video evidence with your own eyes, and then you see what the Trump people say, you're just like, well, that's not right. And that's something that they've pointed out really well in the Korean media, where they're just like, this is what Trump posts on social media. That's what the Trump people say. But then when you can actually see, video evidence for yourself of various incidents, and it's not just the shooting of Alex Pretty. They also show, like, say, the arrest of the 5-year-old kid, and like any sane person can see, like, why are you arresting children at schools? And then they'll show students protesting and stuff like that. And again, I just want to show you guys that you're not alone. People can see what's going on all around the world. Have a listen a bit more here.
He was frozen and paralyzed. He was not crying, but he looked so scared.
이 때문에 가족을 붙잡기 위해 아이를 미끼로 썼다는 비판이 제기됐지만,
and kind of what they're explaining there is, like, the family's worried, everyone's worried about the kid, and you can see some English interview. Those show Vance, and then they'll say basically Vance looks like an idiot, because then they say, well, ICE people are out arresting kids. So like I said, it's a different point of view when you're outside the USA, because you can't accuse people of being outside the USA of being like Democrat or Republican. It's just not like that. Things become so hyper partisan in the USA, where there actually is truth out there, and just believe your own eyes, I guess is what I have to say.
How can you justify incarcerating a child?
Like they show right there. I mean, you just pepper spraying a guy in the ground, you can see this stuff. So this is what we're seeing here in Korea. I know it's the same stuff you're seeing in USA, but just know that we see what's going on as well. Here's some more. Yeah, I mean, we see it all. This is also a local reporter from Korea is actually, I think this would be Minnesota here.
분노는 확산되고 있습니다. 주택가인 사고 현장엔 추모 인파가 몰렸습니다. 이곳은 퇴근 시간 무렵부터 모여든 이웃 주민들로 꽉 채워져 항의 열기는 뜨거워졌습니다. 정의가 실종됐다고 외치는 주민들은 이웃이 무참히 당하는 걸 보면서 형언하기 어려운 거대한 슬픔과 분노.
So I just want to say, I know, and it's hard for me to translate all of the Korean going, but you can get the basic idea. They're just saying, people are upset, and rightfully so. And then they'll interview some local people here.
I've never been angrier in my life. I feel like my rights as an American citizen are being trampled upon, our constitutional rights.
And they're giving voice to local people on the Korean news. That's what I'm showing you guys. We can see what's happening. Here's some more.
연방 이민 당국은 제 뒤로 보시는 것처럼 고무탄총뿐만 아니라 소총까지.
The reason why I'm showing you is because he's at all the locations. I mean, he's there live. Then they show what Trump is saying, but basically Trump's a liar, and they do show it. Like, so it's not like we don't show it. So you do see both sides, but then it doesn't match with what your eyes see. The Trump says what says doesn't match what your eyes see. That's why it's important, and then they'll show the signs.
참다 못해 고등학생들까지 시위에 나서게 된 겁니다.
I know a lot of my friends who might not necessarily even be immigrants are feeling feared.
하루 전엔 베네수엘라 이민자가.
So that's what they're showing us in Korea. They'll translate some of Trump's, words basically, and then they look at, this is Trump's America. And then when they show Stephen Miller, it looks like 1930s Germany. I mean, and you can see it for yourself. Like that's what they're showing us here in Korea, right? They show this crazy crap that Trump says, and then they show Stephen Miller. And so for us, it's like really obvious that the Trump people are bad. It's obvious to anyone objectively watching. Like look at this stuff. And I know how it is in USA. You kind of already know this stuff, but I just want to give you a different point of view to where, because here that you can't accuse the Koreans of being partisan. Like we're just watching objectively, like what the heck is going on in USA? These are comments from Korea. They say, just regular people say, like, that's just giving power to psychopaths who just want to shoot people, talking about the recent killing of Alex Pretty. They're just murderers and crazy people. These guys are truly insane. And to think that someone who condones murder is the president of the United States, right? This is no longer the America we know. It's so terrifying. Here's another person. That's almost like execution. And here's more. I'm just reading Korean comments. Does it make sense to subdue all 5 of them and then shoot them with a gun? This is crazy. Another person, if you shoot them 10 times and give them first aid, will they survive? Those bad guys, that's murder. He should be arrested and executed. That's what happens when you elect a crazy person as your leader. Shooting a gun right in front of your eyes while several people are completely subdued, doesn't that just look like murder? Those gangsters and thugs, how can you call that legitimate public power? They're just effing MF who want to shoot guns. America is crazy. They shoot their own people in the face and head. So again, this is coming from Korea. Let me show you a little bit what they're saying in the UK. This is BBC.
The family of a man killed by federal immigration officers in Minneapolis say he cared deeply about people and was upset by President Trump's immigration crackdown in his city. Alex Jeffrey Pretty, who was 37, was an intensive care nurse for retired soldiers. While he did have a gun, CBS News, the BBC's partner station in the US, notes that US Border Patrol officers did not specify if he had brandished it. Mr. Pretty's family members say he owned a handgun and had a permit to carry a concealed handgun. He's a second person.
Right. And then they'll show the same footage that we're all seeing. That's why I just want to show you guys, like, we all see the same thing. So as I keep telling you, just believe your own eyes. Some more here.
Protests have been taking place around the site of the shooting. Law enforcement clashing there with demonstrators and using what appears to be tear gas on the crowd.
What I've been hearing and seeing is that the community has been talking to each other as real people, and these people have come in and been hurting us. They've been attacking us when we've been doing nothing but following the law, peacefully observing, and then they decide to gang up and kill one of us.
What have you been hearing about what happened this morning?
What happened this morning is they tried to go into a restaurant. The restaurant didn't let them in, and a peaceful observer was recording them, and they decided to get aggressive with that peaceful observer. And then when there were 6, 8 of them on top of one person, they decided to shoot them in cold blood.
And then there's Tim Walz, which they'll show. They'll show the local mayor, and it's the stuff you've already seen in the USA, but I'm just saying we see the same thing. This is BBC coverage of it. They also have someone there at night.
But people are still gathered at the scene of the shooting. Our correspondent Tom Bateman is there.
Well, this is the spot where Alex Pretty was shot dead. And you can see now a lot of people here. I've seen hundreds come and go over the course of the last few hours. People laying flowers. They've come to light candles and laying them, writing messages.
If you feel like that you're alone, I just want to tell you, you are not alone. It may feel like that depending on where you are in USA, because some people say, Chris, I have a bunch of MAGA family members, or I have MAGA friends, or I live in a red state. It just feels like you're alone. I'll say there's other people in USA who can see it. Plus, you have all the people around the world that can see what's happening. Here's more. This is from German news, right? Even in Germany, they're talking about, you got to talk about this stuff. And they show the local scene, all the same footage that we've all seen. Plus, I want you to see this.
Shortly after the shooting, angry crowds gathered at the scene, and clashes between law enforcement and demonstrators broke out as officers deployed tear gas to disperse the crowd.
Down! Just chill. Okay. I'm fine. I don't even breathe anything. I'm just angry. I'm 7 years old. Angry.
The incident unfolded just a day after thousands of people marched through the city.
And I know it's upsetting to watch this stuff, but it's just important for that regular people's voices are heard, right? If a 7-year-old man he's angry, we all should be angry and upset. Anytime that the Trump votes go out and just shoot people like this is absolutely insane. And that's why, when you see the footage with your own eyes, you can see what's going on, right? And this is German news. This is DW.
Yeah, I've been on the phone all day today with friends and family in Minneapolis. People are very upset. They're very frustrated. Some of them are scared because this continues to happen. They're essentially under assault by the federal government at this point. And we're being told essentially Goebbelian lies about what our own eyes can see is happening on video. They're frustrated with elected leaders that they haven't done more to protect the people of Minneapolis. And they're very angry about the federal government inciting what is happening in the state of Minnesota. It's not just happening in Minneapolis.
And actually, it's important to hear this professor talking about that, how, federal people, like basically Trump people, are inciting things. And it was actually very similar to what they were saying in the Korean news also. I can't speak if they're saying that in British news or French news or other places. It's hard for me to go through everything. But I just think just a regular, reasonable person, and again, it's important to say get an international perspective, because we're not talking about Democrat or Republican, because if you're in USA, like everyone thinks like there's only two sides and you have to take a particular team. No, when you go outside the country, and it's just completely different. Like literally, we just look at it and we can see what's going on. And if someone says, okay, someone's dangerous, and you look at the video and they have someone, unarmed on the ground shoot multiple times, any normal person would be like, that's terrible, right? And just think of it this way: if you're American, let's say you're a MAGA person, right? And you love Trump and that kind of stuff. Just imagine if you tuned in and you saw in another country they shot an unarmed person on the ground like multiple times, like you would just call it out immediately. And so I think right now what is happening, and I hope so, at least, I can't read what's everyone's hearts and what everyone's thinking, in the MAGA land or whatever. But I hope they can just at least be honest with themselves, because going out there and just keep going on with the lie of what Trump is saying, that basically the Trump people are trying to say we can, go into anyone's home without warrants. Now they're saying we can just shoot anyone that we want. I mean, there's no way that this can continue if people are honest. And that's why, for me, guys, I have my opinions, I have my point of views on all of these things, but, I just try to just lay it out there. And I always make it clear, like, this is what's going on. This is my view and stuff like that. And also right now I'm just showing you, this is what is being shown around the world, and everyone can see the same footage for themselves. And for me, it's obvious it's just obvious. Like a simple thing would be, if the Trump people are going to try to make the case that he's, holding a gun or something like that, and then you look at the videos, like, I don't see him doing that at all. Right. And it's just like, there is a truth here out there. So anyway, I know sometimes you feel like you're going crazy if you're surrounded by people who won't face the truth. But just again, I just want to make it just really, really clear for anyone who needs to hear this, that you're not alone. And ultimately, truth will prevail on all.
Approval rating on Trump's administration program to deport immigrants who are in the country illegally. It was plus 18 points at the beginning of his presidency, net approval rating. That is very, very positive. It was one of the most popular things in the Trump administration agenda. But now you come over to this side of the screen. Look at that. That's over a 25-point switcheroo in the negative direction.
We, as law enforcement community, have been receiving endless complaints about civil rights violations in our streets from U.S. citizens. What we're hearing is they're being stopped in traffic stops or on the street with no cause and being forced to demand paperwork to determine if they are here legally. As this went on over the past 2 weeks, we started hearing from our police officers the same complaints as they fell victim to this while off duty. Every one of these individuals is a person of color who has had this happen to them.
Well, you just heard from Brooklyn Park, Minnesota Police Chief Mark Burley, who detailed that ICE is not only abusing ordinary American citizens or those suspected of being in the country illegally. It turns out ICE agents are also racially profiling and harassing actual sworn officers, police officers in Minnesota. Now, it is important to hear more from Burley and what he had to say about the experiences that deputies have had with ICE agents on the ground in Minneapolis and Minnesota in general. Because make no mistake about it, you will hear over and over again from defenders of the Trump administration or those who are, very concerned about carrying out immigration enforcement, raids, that no, this isn't happening. Everything is normal. Everything is above, above any possible criminality or illegality. You don't have to worry about anything. ICE is just trying to do their jobs. But you know what? Not according to, again, Brooklyn Park, Minnesota Police Chief Mark Burley. Let's hear more from what he had to say.
In Brooklyn Park, one particular officer that shared her story with me was stopped as she passed ICE going down the roadway. When they boxed her in, they demanded her paperwork, of which she's a US citizen and clearly would not have any paperwork. When she became concerned about the rhetoric and the way she was being treated, she pulled out her phone. In an attempt to record the incident, the phone was knocked out of her hands, prevented her from recording it. The officer had their guns drawn during this interaction. And after the officer became so concerned, they were forced to identify themselves as a Brooklyn Park police officer in hopes of slowing the incident and de-escalating the incident down. The agents then immediately left after hearing this, making no other comments, no other apologies, just got in their vehicles and left. I wish I could tell you that this was an isolated incident. In fact, many of the chiefs standing behind me have similar incidents with their off-duty officers. If it is happening to our officers, it pains me to think of how many of our community members are falling victim to this every day.
You literally have militarized federal agents pulling over random people who don't look lily white to ask them for their papers, to ask them whether they're here in this country legally.
Yeah, they've been doing it.
Now look, there might be some who think that's totally okay. I don't fall in that category at all.
I didn't give a shit.
Because those types of actions by militarized federal agents are in no way indicative of a free society. I don't want to see militarized law enforcement or federal agents on our streets, harassing and terrorizing ordinary people. And it's one thing to hear the types of comments you just heard from Police Chief Burley, from, let's say, a left-winger who has espoused views that are supportive of open borders, right? You can nitpick and you can say, oh, well, this person's got an agenda. Are you gonna make the same argument about this police chief? By the way, he wasn't the only member of law enforcement who's been raising red flags over what ICE has been carrying out. So let me give you a few other examples. There's Chief Axel Henry from the St. Paul Police. He had something to say too. He was quoted as saying, can we find a way to make sure that we can do these things, meaning enforce our immigration laws, without scaring the hell out of our community members and freaking everyone out? People are scared to death and afraid to go outside. Is this the America everyone wants to live in? This has gone beyond enforcing immigration laws. I mean, it had already gone beyond enforcing immigration laws well before the police chief, Burley, decided to hold this press conference. We're just gonna be okay with racially profiling people in America, which is a diverse country that has people from all over the world who came from other countries, sure, but might have been here for multiple generations. They just don't, they don't have blonde hair, light skin. Imagine pulling cops over to ask them for their papers. This is insane. This is absolutely insane. And I'm glad that local law enforcement decided to carry out this press conference and let the American people know what's really going on in the ground. Because yeah, I get it, our media is super polarized. Our media tends to serve validation to one political extreme or the other, but what's the reality? And the reality is we are normalizing militarized federal agents on our streets. And do we want to live in that kind of society? My answer is no. I don't want to live in that type of society. In fact, I thought the United States was supposed to be better than that. I thought the United States was supposed to stand out from other authoritarian countries by not allowing people who work for us to terrorize us. And when I say work for us, I mean that in every sense of the word. We pay their damn salaries. We pay them to enforce the laws that our elected representatives passed. ICE isn't supposed to go around coercing people, threatening people, shooting people, profiling people, but that's what's going on right now. It could have something to do with the fact that, Trump doesn't really care about basic things like training. I mean, he's a moron himself, not someone who's really interested in new ideas, new information, getting trained on doing his job properly. Not really something he personally is interested in. But ICE officers went from having 6 months of training, which I would venture to say still isn't enough, but okay. They went from 6 months of training to just 47 days of training. You wanna know why? Oh, I'm the 47th president. Oh, wouldn't it be cute if we cut down their training to 47 days? What a loser. Total, undeniable loser. I have grown, and it's not a new thing. This has been percolating for a while. I have grown increasingly distrustful of our government, and I am not in favor of concentrating more power in our government. Unfortunately, that has been the case. That's what has happened, okay, over the last several years, especially beginning with Trump's first administration. And now we have a situation where we have militarized police officials, or I should say militarized federal agents, ICE officials, Border Patrol agents, roaming our streets, basically abusing people, racially profiling people.
They call it
I thought
police.
the mechanisms that we have in place to fight back against this type of authoritarianism, tyranny, harassment would maybe work. But here's the problem. It doesn't work when you don't have an opposition party that has, I don't know, courage, a little bit of fight in them. I mean, where are the Democrats on this issue? Other than tweeting about it, other than whining about it, other than putting statements out about it, which by the way, us American citizens can just do ourselves. We don't need to elect someone to do that for us. But they haven't done much other than that. It's so utterly frustrating and it's crazy. It's crazy. Now you literally have local law enforcement talking about how their own deputies are being racially profiled and harassed by militarized federal agents purporting to carry out immigration enforcement. Are they? Are they? Stories coming out regarding individuals who were arrested on January 6th for storming the Capitol. Looks like some of them have gotten hired as ICE officials, or I should say ICE agents. This is absolutely crazy. So this is also hurting the Republicans politically, because I know these piece of crap, cowardly politicians who might actually have an issue with what the Trump administration is doing, but aren't saying a damn thing about it. They'll only be moved to action if maybe they're starting to lose support among Republican voters. And it looks like, I mean, when it comes to independent voters, Trump is done, totally lost that coalition that he built in order to win the popular vote. But overall, when you look at the American electorate, where are their hearts and minds on the issue of ICE essentially terrorizing communities across the country? I shouldn't say across the country, terrorizing blue cities and towns across the country. Let's watch.
This was such a strength for the president of the United States. The net approval rating on Trump's administration program to deport immigrants who are in the country illegally. It was plus 18 points at the beginning of his presidency, net approval rating. That is very, very positive. It was one of the most popular things in the Trump administration agenda. But now you come over to this side of the screen, look at that. That's over a 25-point switcheroo in the negative direction. Now the program is way, way, way underwater at minus 8 points. Okay, the Trump administration is prioritizing deporting dangerous criminals or others. You go back to June, the majority of Americans, 53%, said the Trump administration was prioritizing deporting dangerous criminals compared to just 47% who said others. Come to this side. What do we have now? A complete switcheroo. Now what you see is the majority of the American people believe that the Trump administration is not prioritizing deporting dangerous criminals. In fact, they're prioritizing deporting others at 56%.
ICE even arrested some Native Americans. They detained Native Americans who, I don't know if they need to be informed about this. They have more of a right to be here than anyone else. And when it comes to local law enforcement and how the DOJ is handling some of the allegations against these agents and their, harassment and profiling of literal law enforcement deputies, it doesn't seem like they care too much at all about what's going on. In fact, they want to punish local law enforcement. So today, in fact, the Justice Department sent subpoenas to at least 5 Democratic officials in Minnesota. That included Governor Tim Walz, unsurprisingly, Mayor Jacob Frey of Minneapolis, and Mayor Coley Herr of St. Paul. Okay, so the subpoenas are related to policies on immigration enforcement efforts in the state. And their big gripe is that, the police are standing in our way when there's really no indication of that whatsoever. That's the excuse they usually use. And I get it. By the way, I get that there are very particular provisions in some sanctuary city and state laws that, if you ask me, don't make sense. The American people overwhelmingly want to deport individuals who are here illegally who have been convicted of crimes. So if you have the federal government asking municipalities and cities, hey, here is a retainer for this individual after they serve their sentence because we want to deport them. How about in that one very narrow instance, you work with them so they can't have something to hang their hat on as they're terrorizing ordinary people in communities like Minneapolis, St. Paul. But honestly, at this point, that's my only issue with these sanctuary city laws. When they do provide cover and refuse to comply in specific instances of someone who's been convicted, who is a criminal and should be deported. But other than that, the Trump administration has absolutely no justification for what we are seeing on our streets right now. The chaos and the intimidation tactics are the point. And I'm sure Trump is looking at the polling. He wants nothing more than constant validation and ass kissing. It is pathetic. I've never seen a grown man be this obsessed with himself, but here we are. And so I'm sure he's seen some of this polling, and wouldn't you know it, he's softening his message a little bit when it comes to, the 37-year-old mom who was shot in the face by an ICE agent in Minnesota, Renee Good. Now, if you can remember, previously, Trump said of Renee Good immediately after she was shot to death by an ICE agent, quote, she behaved horribly and then she ran him over. She didn't try to run him over, she ran him over. Now we've all seen the videos featuring Renee Good getting shot to death by an ICE agent, and in no way did she run an ICE agent over, in no way. And maybe he got some backlash for being a disgusting creep and defaming an American citizen based on nothing. Based on, he hadn't even watched the video yet, by the way. He saw the video for the first time during an interview. But now he's changed his tune a little bit. But of course, there's got to be a narcissistic reason why. So see if you can catch it. Let's watch.
They're going to make mistakes sometimes. ICE is going to be too rough with somebody, or they're dealing with rough people. They're going to make a mistake. Sometimes it can happen. We feel terribly. I felt horribly when I was told that the young woman who was had the tragedy. It's a tragedy. It's a horrible thing. Everybody would say, ICE would say the same thing. But when I learned her parents, and her father in particular I hope he still is, but I don't know, was a tremendous Trump fan. He was all for Trump, loved Trump. And, it's terrible. I was told that by a lot of people. They said, oh, he loves you. He was, I hope he still feels that way. I don't know, it's a hard situation. But her father was a tremendous, and parents were tremendous Trump fans. That's so sad. It just happens. It's terrible.
It just happens? It's sad because her parents are Trump supporters, that's why it's sad? You don't think it's sad that because of your policies and your hiring practices when it comes to ICE, you have created chaotic situations on American streets that have led to people getting killed. How many people who have been detained by ICE during your second term have died while in ICE custody? So far this year is set to break a new record. And we already know about how many literal American citizens have been detained by ICE for being suspected of being undocumented. Even though they say over and over again, I'm an American citizen, I'm an American citizen. Who the hell walks around with immigration papers? Who the hell walks around with their birth certificate? I guess if you have a little bit of a tan, tint in your skin, you better walk around with your birth certificate. You better walk around with your papers. We live in a free society. That's what this is? No, this isn't a free society. Hasn't been in a long, long time. I mean, you couple this with people getting confronted by cops at their residences because they posted something critical of Israel. Is that what happens in a free and open society? Is that what happens in a democracy? The Democrats who were fear-mongering about the loss of democracy the most, of course, only during the election, suddenly super quiet, super quiet. Congress is useless, okay? These elected lawmakers, these political leaders are useless, too busy fundraising, not enough time to actually do a damn thing to protect the American people from what the federal government is currently up to, from what the White House is currently up to, hiring a bunch of criminals who don't respect our rule of law, don't respect our democratic process and the outcome of our general election. Those are the people who are getting hired for ICE right now. And rather than having appropriate training, which I can't believe was only 6 months, but it was, they're getting 47 days. Congratulations, America. This is what tyranny looks like. I hope you enjoy the armed federal agents in your towns, right-wing voters, but you probably won't. That's the thing, because we're so divided and political actions are motivated by partisanship. So it's only the blue cities and the blue states that are dealing with this. But I just want to ask you, if you happen to be a conservative or you happen to vote for Republicans, how would you feel if there were militarized federal agents roaming your streets and asking you for your papers? And do you want to live in a country like that? Because I don't.
Prove you are getting the worst of the worst. Show us the murderers and the rapists and the killers that you are arresting. Stop yourself. Then tell us you're not rounding up
with the pictures.
You can't stop yourself, man.
Hang on a second.
Zip it.
Look, I gotta be honest, okay? Lee McGowan, who's the host of Politics Girl, is kind of on a generational run, like 2 nights in a row. First night, she crushes Scott Jennings. Second night, she crushes another right winger on the issue of Trump using ICE to basically do what we've been seeing on the streets of Minnesota, okay? So Cenk, your 2 cents before I show you the goods.
Sure, I wanna see more, are you crazy? Let's go on a crushing spree. And most importantly, guys, the tide has turned. So now not only are they getting crushed all over media, but a lot of the independents are now making fun of the right wing being for love it.
You know, and we've all seen have power and impunity that they've been enjoying, especially in Minnesota, where local law enforcement are now saying that ICE has been racially profiling their own deputies, along with, of course, ordinary members of their community. So let's just get a little refresher on that.
In Brooklyn Park, one particular officer that shared her story with me was stopped as she passed ICE going down the roadway. When they boxed her in, they demanded her paperwork, of which she's a US citizen and clearly would not have any paperwork. When she became concerned about the rhetoric and the way she was being treated, she pulled out her phone. In an attempt to record the incident, the phone was knocked out of her hands, prevented her from recording it. The officer had their guns drawn during this interaction. And after the officer became so concerned, they were forced to identify themselves as a Brooklyn Park police officer in hopes of slowing the incident and de-escalating the incident down. The agents then immediately left after hearing this, making no other comments, no other apologies, just got in their vehicles and left. I wish I could tell you that this was an isolated incident. In fact, many of the chiefs standing behind me have similar incidents with their off-duty officers. If it is happening to our officers, it pains me to think that how many of our community members are falling victim to this every day.
Now, that was the police chief for Brooklyn Park, Minnesota. And the CNN panel discussed what's been going down in Minnesota. During that conversation, Republican strategist Kristen Davison argued that we're in this situation because of the Biden administration. Let's take a look.
What can't be denied is that we are in this situation because Democrats under the Biden administration sat back and let this happen for 4 years. We've had 8 months where not one illegal immigrant has crossed over the border, and that's because of the Trump administration.
I hear what you're saying, but the problem is, you see, it's not a question of Democrats versus Republicans. It's a question of the truth.
Choice.
The question of the truth. Neither one of the parties want to tell the truth. So if you two just want to tend to be preoccupied with being parasitic on the Democrats, we can talk about the Democrats till the cows come home. There's no doubt that the Democrats did, in fact, were a colossal failure when it came to immigration. That's a fact. But the other truth is this. The other truth is this, though. Let me finish now, brother. Don't just keep your float up. University of Mississippi now. If every immigrant disappeared in America tomorrow, which makes it a distraction now, they're talking about immigrants. We still have poverty. We still have deep conflict, class, racial conflict.
You'd have a lot less crime.
Well,
you'd have a lot less crime.
A lot of Native Americans, a lot of Americans vote.
You'd have a lot less crime.
But no, it's all a distraction. It's all a distraction.
Okay, I want to co-sign onto what was just said there. It seems like there was agreement from both sides that the Biden administration failed miserably on immigration policy. And I do believe it got us to where we are today. I do. And if the Democrats don't take responsibility for that and change course moving forward, then they only have themselves to blame. We can't keep doing this pendulum swing from not enforcing immigration laws to doing whatever the hell we're seeing on our streets right now, which is victimizing American citizens, by the way. Okay. But Jake, I want to get your thoughts before I get to where it gets real heated.
Yeah. So 2 more cents here. First of all, I totally agree with Cornel West, and part of the reason for that is that this whole right wing, left wing thing. Even though I just said right wing a minute ago, as soon as I said it, it's kind of a misnomer. So like if you say extreme right loves what ICE is doing, definitely. Maybe a lot of the not maybe. I'm sure a lot of the right loves what ICE is doing, right? But really, it's not about right or left. It's about like cucks for Trump, and to be honest, cucks for Democratic leadership, right? Cucks for Biden, et cetera. And those guys versus the rest of us who are rational, right? And I think that's 2/3 of the country. And so the cucks for Trump will be like, oh, I love what ICE is doing. Shoot more in the face. Yeah, right? Whereas a lot of independents who voted for Trump, and yeah, a decent amount of right wingers who voted for Trump are like, I wanted you to close the border. Great job. That's why I was very happy in the beginning. I wanted you to take out the undocumented folks who were criminals. Great job. I didn't want you to shoot moms in the face 3 times. I don't know why that's so unclear, right? And finally, on that note, look, the masks and the lack of badges are way more problematic than I think Trump and his team realize. When people see that, they see thugs, they see like almost vigilantes. They don't see police officers, because police officers have badges and they don't wear masks. So it's an enormous problem for Trump.
I mean, look, a lot of independents have turned on Trump, independents who ended up voting for him in the last general election. And I have seen, it's not nearly enough, but I have seen some Trump supporters turn on him as well on the right, because what they see is tyrannical government, right? When they see militarized federal agents on the streets like that, they're supposedly sensitive to big government, big daddy watch, or big brother watching. And it's more than just watching. Obviously, they're engaging in physical violence against all sorts of people, including American citizens. And as we heard yesterday and today in that video I showed, violence against actual sworn deputies, local police. So with that in mind, as the panel discussed what was going on in Minnesota, things started to really heat up between conservative podcaster Ben Ferguson and McGowan. Let's take a look at that.
I think that what I'm hearing a lot is the Democrats, Biden. Dr. West explained that. And I think the thing is, it's not political to say that we don't want murderers in our country. We don't want pedophiles in our country. We want those people identified and we want those people punished.
Why are you not working with ICE to get rid of them?
Hold on a second.
No, but it's a fair question.
Hold on a second. Just let her. And you.
No, but you just said you want to get rid of them, but you don't work with ICE.
Let's let her make her point so we can understand what she's trying to say. Go ahead. That'd be great. Thanks. Go ahead. Go ahead, Lee. We all want that. Okay. And if Donald Trump wants to get on TV and say, our problem is we haven't highlighted our accomplishments enough, I would say, great, highlight your accomplishments, prove it. Prove you are getting the worst of the worst. Show us the murderers and the rapists and the killers that you are arresting. Stop yourself. Then tell us you're not rounding up.
With a picture.
You can't stop yourself, man.
Hang on a second.
Zip it.
Please.
No, I'm sorry, you're not my mom. And second of all, you don't get to make it up. We've had the posters at the White House, the people that have been arrested. You said show them to me. We have showed them to you.
Just a second.
Well, she's got a point, and Ferguson is wrong because some data has come out today, and it looks into who the Trump administration is actually targeting, and it's not the violent criminals that are here illegally. I'm going to get to that in just a moment, but I wanted you to kind of weigh in first, Cenk.
Look, you're not my mom line is so annoying. Look, people interrupt all the time. I get it. But let her finish the damn point. If you don't let the person finish the point, you have no idea what they're about to say. And that happens to me all the time because I'll start with, look, on the one hand, and before I get to the actual point I want to make, which is on the other hand, they'll interrupt and be like, it drives me crazy. So I like that she was girl boss there. I like that she's regulating. And then on the main point that she's making, of course, if these are all like, so today ICE, this is the one thing I saw, arrested a 5-year-old. I just found out from my daughter that they arrest somebody in her middle school. So they're grabbing up kids and all these people that live in our community that are not criminals. So if you say they're all criminals, prove it, but you can't prove it because of the numbers Anna's about to give it to you.
Yes, okay, so let's talk about this a little bit. So first of all, I came across a video out of Long Beach, California last night that I wanted to share with you all because if you're wondering, well, how did the Trump administration lose so much support on immigration policies when there was such widespread support for Trump's immigration policies in the beginning of his second term? And honestly, I think it's because of videos like this. So I'll explain a little bit, my mic will be up. But this is again in Long Beach, California, where ICE agents were seen taking 2 men who were working as landscapers. So you see them being detained, walked away. According to the Long Beach Post on Instagram, one gardener attempted to scale a nearby wall, but a group of armed agents, mostly masked, chased him down. He told agents that he was born at Memorial, meaning he was born here in the United States, a hospital in Long Beach specifically, and that he was a dual citizen. But the agent said that he would investigate that as the man was loaded into the back of an SUV. Now, if you're wondering, well, why would he run if he's a US citizen? I mean, there are plenty of US citizens now, lots of stories of US citizens who have been detained by ICE. And the profiling, you don't look like a lily white American. They're gonna ask you for your papers. Like that's been going on. So people are terrified. On top of that, the facts don't lie. I wanna get to that a little bit. So there's a new analysis done by the UCLA Center for Neighborhood Knowledge. It was released yesterday, and here are the details. Using ICE detention data from February 2024 through September 2025, the report shows that non-criminal Latinos have become a central target of enforcement, despite claims that policy prioritizes serious offenders. Monthly detentions of Latinos without criminal records increased 6-fold compared to the final year of the Biden administration. So if you look at the dates, you can tell, okay, well, this also covers some of the Biden administration, right? Which is important. It's important that they do that so you can do a comparative analysis. And so let's take a look at this visual because you're gonna get some interesting information here. All right, so as you can see, this is average number of Latinos entering ICE detention per month by criminal status. And the non-criminal element is highlighted in the solid blue line. And so you can see that number really jump up during the Trump administration. So these are non-criminal, undocumented immigrants who have been detained by ICE. And if you break it down by country of citizenship, detainees of non-criminal Mexican and Guatemalan descent increased 8-fold. Venezuelans, their arrests increased 4-fold under Trump. Again, we're only talking about non-criminals. The study states we focus on this group because they are unambiguously not the worst of the worst, but instead are law-abiding and contributing members of society. They also add that these are the types of immigrants that an overwhelming majority of Americans believe are a good thing for this country today and should have a path to citizenship. So I've got a few more details if we have time for them, but Cenk, jump in.
Two important points here. Good news, bad news. So the bad news is that I think that Trump is doing this for two reasons. One is to appease his hardcore base, and the hardcore base does like this. So it's, in that sense, it's not coming out of nowhere, even though the great majority of Americans do not like this, right? But the second reason I think he's doing it is more important, and the real reason, which is he wants to agitate, and he wants to dig into these communities and cause so much havoc until someone does something back. And when they do, that's it, even time for a bigger police state and a bigger military presence and the Insurrection Act, and make sure that I get my shock troops on the ground. Why do we need shock troops in America? Our problem was higher prices, not because we didn't have military and thugs en masse in the streets trying to cause trouble. I mean, at this point, is ICE preventing more crime or creating more crime? What problem is it trying to fix? No, this is just agitate, so something goes wrong, so you'll have an excuse to have a bigger presence, a military presence, because he's authoritarian by nature. It's a giant problem, especially if you're among the people who said, don't tread on me, because this is a lot of treading, right? And finally, the good news. Look, a couple months ago, I told you guys, that's it. He's gonna lose the Latino vote in unprecedented fashion for the Republican Party. They had him. So many Latinos voted for Trump. It was historic rate, but poof, it's all gone. Now, Karl Rove's on Fox News a couple of days ago going, we might lose Texas. All the Hispanics are gone. Why? Because they told him this wasn't about race, and that they were just gonna get the bad guys. And now it turns out, it looks like it was partly about race. And if you're one of the Trump supporters, you're like, no way, it's not about race. Okay, yeah, that's fine. But go tell Latinos that are getting picked up when they're US citizens that it's not about race. And you can tell them until you're blue in the face, they're not gonna believe you and they're not gonna vote for you.
Yeah, you're totally right about that. I mean, you literally have off-duty police officers in Minnesota getting racially profiled by ICE agents. And I know this because the police chief in Brooklyn Park, Minnesota, held a press conference about it. So any final words, Cenk?
And lastly, the disaster is in what the cop in Minnesota was saying earlier in the video, which is now we got supposed federal law enforcement drawing guns on actual cops, the cops that are in your community and supposed to protect you. Now, what are they gonna do the first time that there's a shooting between local and federal law enforcement? Because Trump's agitating and constantly sending these guys in with almost no training and trying to cause trouble. One day they're gonna cause trouble with an actual cop, and then we're gonna have a true disaster on our hands.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally.
Introduce Scott Ritter to you. He's a very frequent guest of ours because, well, he's the best. He's the master. He's the master of war. He's the master of the politics of war. But he's also, of course, an American patriot who's dismayed by the scenes he's watching in his own country, about which I'm going to ask him first. Scott Ritter, former Marine Corps intelligence officer and United Nations weapons inspector. Welcome back. Can we start at home, if you don't mind? I characterized in my monologue this ICE as a kind of storm association, the SA, the brown shirts, the private army of the dictator. And it seems to me that Caligula is metamorphosing under our eyes. We can see it in real time, into somebody who thinks, at least, that he's no longer the president of the United States, a constitutional republic, but a dictator in Trumpland. How does it all look to you?
Well, sadly, what you're saying, unfortunately, rings true. It's not that the current president of the United States thinks he's a dictator. He says he's a dictator. And he seems to be okay with this. He is a man who has walked away from any notion of legal constraints on what he can do as president. And in the United States, these legal constraints are defined by the Constitution of the United States and the laws that are derived thereof. He has basically said that law no longer matters to him. The only thing that matters is his own sense of personal morality. And we don't need to go too far down that path to understand that that's problematic prima facie. Congress, this isn't something that one man can simply do in America. I mean, we have to face the sad reality in the United States that this experiment we call the constitutional republic is either on its deathbed or has already passed, and we just have yet to bury the body. Congress, mandated by the Constitution to hold executive power in check, is failing to do just that. And the judiciary, which likewise is there to hold executive and legislative power in check because of the rule of law, has been completely undermined by its unwillingness or inability to challenge executive authority. I mean, this dates back to the time of Andrew Jackson, when he famously told the Supreme Court, you passed a law, now enforce it. But that, the idea of a constitutional republic is that we don't need to have an army with the judiciary capable of standing up to the army of the executive. All law enforcement and military in the United States are supposed to adhere to the rule of law set forth by the Constitution. Indeed, they all take an oath, the same oath that those who hold office to uphold and defend this Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. But the sad state of affairs in America today is, I will guarantee you that fully 90% of the people that take that oath have no clue what the Constitution is. Therefore, the oath is meaningless, because they're giving an oath to something that doesn't exist in their mind. The Constitution must reside in the heart of every American if it is going to mean something. And that heart must pump blood infused with constitutional loyalty into the brain of Americans. But Americans don't think constitutionally. We have today in the United States, people who believe that I voted for this. They say this over and over again. This is what I voted for when we speak of ICE in the streets, these stormtroopers, as you rightfully say. My God, in America today, to have men wearing military uniforms, seizing control of the streets, being authorized by their executive leaders to violate the Fourth Amendment of the United States willy-nilly, just to barge into the homes of American citizens without a proper warrant from the judiciary, and the judiciary doing nothing about it, and Congress doing nothing about it, and frankly speaking, the American people doing nothing about it, because this constitutional republic doesn't live unless the people are willing to defend it, and the people are ignorant of that which they are willing to defend. So it's all too easy for this egomaniac to seize dictatorial power, because he has seized dictatorial power, and he now has an army of militarized law enforcement occupying American cities in regions of the country that are not politically loyal to him. And I fear for what will transpire come November in the midterm elections when he turns this army into an occupation force designed to suppress the democratic will of the American people. We are in a lot of trouble in America today, and most Americans are simply ignorant of it because, again, you can't defend that which you do not understand. And for Americans to defend the Constitution, they would not only have to read the Constitution, but live the Constitution. And we are not doing that in this country today.
Well, I think that answer will travel far and wide. And last, a perfect encapsulation, if I may say so, of the current situation. But you say the people are not doing anything about it. Well, they are in Minneapolis. From what I can see, the people of Minneapolis are risen. And this very evening, these stormtroopers are being assailed and attacked. I mean, the worm eventually turns, doesn't it, Scott? When you are wreaking havoc in communities, and it's extraordinary that the two people they've murdered in the last days were both American citizens, both white American citizens, both wholesome American family people, and this latest man was an ICU nurse in the Veteran Affairs Hospital. And he was carrying a weapon that he was fully entitled to carry. And he concealed it as he was fully entitled to do, indeed required to do. He never pulled a gun. The gun was taken from his holster, and then they murdered him. It's as clear a case of cold-blooded murder as I've ever seen on camera.
George, you're 100% correct. I mean, this is an extraordinarily sad day. I mean, it was sad when they killed a 37-year-old mother whose sole crime was trying to survive the assault being waged on her by ICE officers who were reaching into her vehicles, illegally so, and she was trying to escape, and they murdered her. They killed her. She wasn't gunning after anybody, seeking to assault anybody. And anybody who says that is, frankly speaking, I have to be careful what I say, but they're not in tune with the facts. They're straight up lying, but it's more than lying, George. There's a mental illness that's afflicted the American people, and it's the mental illness of power. And the need, we've seen it, how we operate overseas. I've been very critical of this, how, people who could be law-abiding Americans here can go to Iraq and shoot a man for crossing the street, or shooting a farmer for approaching their checkpoint, or just barging into a home and slaughtering a family and walk away and think nothing of it. It's an indifference to humanity. It's an indifference to human life that exists as in the way America interfaces the world, because it's us versus them. But now in America, we've taken that same mindset of us versus them, and we have Americans versus Americans. And frankly speaking, we don't have Americans versus Americans, because the Americans doing the assaulting aren't Americans, because you can't be an American unless you are loyal to the constitutional republic. And so we have non-Americans, these citizen aliens, so to speak, who are hunting down the law-abiding Americans, citizens, and murdering them in the streets. Yes, I applaud anybody who resists this unlawful use of authority, but I fear because, I used to believe that those who took an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution would never take arms against law-abiding American citizens, that is a red line that could never be crossed. I am not certain of that today, because more and more I am seeing that the people who put on the uniform, whether it's a law enforcement uniform or an American military uniform with the flag of the United States of America on their shoulders, that flag doesn't mean the same thing to them as it means to real Americans, people who love their country, who believe in the Constitution. That flag has become a symbol of oppression, of authority, of brutality, that it's an empowerment to commit these acts. And I fear for the citizens of Minneapolis, because if the brutal power of federal authority is unleashed to its full extent, it will be a very, very bloody day, and woe be it for the nation when that happens.
Yeah, it could be Kent State exponentially expanded. Isn't all of this the reason why Americans were given the constitutional right to bear arms, to defend themselves against an oppressive and expansionist, dictatorial federal government?
George, here's where I need to be careful. And you know why I need to be careful. Because every word I say is being monitored by this very same federal government. I believe in the Constitution of the United States of America. Therefore, I brook no illegal challenge to constitutional rule. And therefore, I would never embrace any notion of violent opposition to the Constitution of the United States. But when the Constitution ceases to exist and the government that is carrying out its actions is so far removed from constitutional authority that it ceases to be recognizable as a government, one can only fear what the consequences of that could be. The Second Amendment gives every American a right to bear arms, and it is derived from the necessity of an armed citizenry to prevent tyranny from being lorded over them by governments that have lost faith with the people. And if you look at what happened in Minneapolis, one can only say that the government has lost faith with the people. And again, the consequences of that are horrifying. I believe in nonviolent resistance to government. I believe that freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and the kind of opposition that Martin Luther King was famous for leading in the streets of America. Civil disobedience is the way forward. I believe in the potential of the American people to rally to the cause of the Constitution and elect people to represent them in higher office who believe in the same values. This is what I believe in, and this is what I'm going to fight for, and this is how I will fight. But I will not sit here and pretend that other people may view the situation in the United States far differently and may believe that the Second Amendment is their last refuge of defense.
Let's turn to the international scene then, Scott, because if America is violent at home, it's far more violent abroad. And I was making the point in my monologue that all of the military pieces are now in place for much speculated upon new assault on Iran. Certainly the Iranians believe that. Your friend and mine, the great Professor Marandi, believes it. And the closing of the airspace, airlines canceling flights to the areas that would be immediately affected, even Dubai. The flights were canceled yesterday. The fear is that Trump, perhaps to again perform the look over there maneuver, is about to launch a new war. Do you think he is?
Sadly, I do believe he is. I was not someone who believed that he was going to attack in this last go around because the pieces weren't there. It was clear that if he did attack when people were suspecting in the aftermath of the riots, that the Iranians had the unmatched ability to annihilate the American forces in the region and inflict horrific harm on Israel. The Israelis, from what I can tell, have made it clear to the United States that they're willing to absorb up to 700 Iranian ballistic missiles. And that's a price they're willing to pay if, at the end of this exchange of military power, there is no Iranian regime, that the United States and Israel are successful in removing the Iranian regime from power. And we need to understand this, that the United States is not seeking to do another slap on the wrist or military demonstration. That if the United States participates in military action against Iran, it will be of an existential nature, meaning we are seeking regime change in Iran. The Iranians must know this, which means there can be no checks on their response. and they must immediately respond in a way that is not only devastating to American military and Israeli infrastructure, but the energy security structure of the entire Middle East. This can no longer be theoretical. It must be real. It must be actualized, and it has to be instantaneous. I think too many people in the world today have become accustomed to conflict in the Middle East being spectacular on the video screens of their television or their cell phones or wherever they watch their news, but it doesn't impact their day-to-day lives. I fear that this next conflict will have a tremendous negative impact on the entire world because it will be disruptive of that which fuels the entire world, the energy that comes from the Middle East. It will be destructive to global markets, fragile economies, including the one here in the United States that lack resilience, will collapse or will be greatly damaged. And people will wake up. For all the people out there who believe that a Shah would be better than an Ayatollah, understand that this is not the case. The Iranian people, first of all, do not want a Shah. The majority of the Iranian people, while they recognize that their current government has policies that need to be improved on, are supportive of this democracy that is the Islamic Republic. Again, people need to stop being wedded to their ignorance. This is not a dictatorship of Ayatollahs. This is a functioning, thriving democracy where people regularly empower elected officials in the parliament and in the presidency. They also elect people who monitor the theocracy, the assembly of experts. Do your homework, people. Google it, find out what it is, and find out how they're elected. The people elect the assembly of experts, and the assembly of experts monitors the supreme leader. So he's not a supreme leader. There's democratic checks and balances on everybody in Iran, and it functions in a way that is responsive to the needs of the people. Look at the videos coming out of Tehran in the malls. How many hijabs did you see in the malls? Not too many. Many women are wearing their hair freed from the hijab. Why? Because according to the Iranian president, who I had the honor and privilege of speaking to last September, he said, we listened to the people. We recognize there must be changes in policy. That is a government responsive to the needs of the people. Let it alone. Let them live in peace. Let them do what they need to do to thrive, to prosper, just like all of us. But instead, we've allowed our ignorance about Iran to manifest itself so that anything negative said about Iran is believed at face value. And now governments filled in power by the ignorance of their respective populations to carry out a conflict that is going to be not just disruptive to the world economy, but destructive to the world economy.
Turning then lastly, and I'm grateful for your time as always, to the most destructive of the many destructive currents that are loose in the world, that in the Ukraine. Now, on one level, talks seem to have quickened, leading, in my heart at least, to a renewed optimism that this can be resolved without having to be fought all the way to Kiev. Are you optimistic about how things are on that track?
Sadly, George, I don't share your optimism. Yes, I see these negotiations taking place, but Karen Knissel, she's the former Austrian foreign minister who currently resides in St. Petersburg, where she heads something called the Gorky Institute. She is a specialist in foreign affairs. She has said something over and over again, and I agree with her. Whenever you hear anybody talking about a deal, that's the language of gangsters. That's the language of thugs. Real governments don't make deals. Real governments sign treaties. Real governments have agreements that are based in writing. What we're seeing right now is an American rush to a deal. And fortunately, the Russians are pushing back. They don't want to deal. The Russians have said, going back to December of 2021, when they put forward draft treaties about a new European security framework, that all arrangements with the West must be in writing It must be treaty-based. It must be binding and enforceable. So the Russians aren't looking for a deal. They're not gangsters. And so you have the Russians sitting down at the table. And again, we don't have all the details coming out of the United Arab Emirates, but what we are seeing is that the Russians are holding the Americans' feet to the fire for the agreement that was reached between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump in Anchorage, Alaska, about the status of the Donbass. 100% Russian controlled, no foreign troops at all. And now you see that the deal makers in the United States are trying to go back on that. We're going to have a peacekeeper force. The Russians won't control all of it. And the Russians are, no, we're not cutting a deal with you. We're not doing that sort of thing. This is going to be an agreement in writing, a treaty. And until not just the United States, but Ukraine and Europe understand that this, because even Europe, this, George, look at Minsk. The Europeans never intended to implement Minsk. It was always a deal designed to buy time. The Ukrainians are the same way. They aren't looking for a lasting peace with Russia. They're looking for a pause in the conflict, during which time they can recover, rebuild, re-equip, retrain, and resume the war. The Russians are looking for a final solution to the problem, and I'm not using that in a Nazi Jew way. I'm using that in making sure that this war does not resurrect its ugly head. Russia's not looking for the destruction of Ukraine. They're looking for the pacification of Ukraine, and that will only happen with a treaty, with an agreement that is binding and long-lasting. It'll never happen with the kind of deal that the West has tried to cut in the United Arab Emirates.
Now, you and I are far from fans of Ted Cruz, but in actuality that was released this evening, I presume secretly recorded, Cruz was utterly damning of Marco Rubio and of Donald Trump, and he predicted that in November the Trump administration is going to lose control, not just of the House, but also of the Senate. And he says that Trump will be impeached every other week. It seems that you're in for a very, very turbulent time in U.S. politics.
I hope so. I hope we're in for a turbulent time. That means that the American people are fighting. That means we're struggling. That means we're not going to just allow ourselves to drown. We're going to kick and scream and struggle and wait and hope that for a rescue can only come from within. I pray that this president, who was given every opportunity to succeed, but has only shown himself capable of embracing violence-fueled failure, I hope he is crushed at the polls. I have encouraged everybody to do anything but vote Republican in the fall, not because I support the Democrats, I don't, but because I don't support Republican dictatorship. I believe that this country needs to be paralyzed politically so the American people wake up to the necessity of refamiliarizing themselves with the Constitution, make this a constitutional republic. Good things can only come from struggle sometimes, and America needs to struggle. We need to have the kind of political struggle, peaceful political struggle. That's how we cure ourselves, not through violence, not through ICE occupying our cities, compelling Americans armed through the benefit of the Second Amendment to violently oppose. That's bad for America. That's the end of America. What we need is the kind of political paralysis that means that the political system is non-functioning and the American people start to elect better people into higher office to represent them, people who believe in the Constitution. So, yes, I would hope that after November, this president wakes up impeached every single day of the week for the rest of his term, that he is paralyzed, that his administration can't continue to run shambles, because that means checks and balances are in place. That means the Constitution is still alive, and that's a wonderful thing.
And Nouri al-Maliki is back. Did you ever see that coming? The Prime Minister of Iraq is the one the U.S. removed. It's not going so well for them there. Well, Scott Ritter, I've kept you longer than you intended.
My bingo card makes no sense.
Donald Trump has been telling reporters that an armada of U.S. Navy vessels is heading towards Iran.
Ships going that direction, just in case. We have a big flotilla going in that direction, and we'll see what happens. It's a big force. We have a big force going toward Iran.
You know what's fascinating about this moment? It's not just the loud threats and the chest thumping. It's the quiet, almost embarrassed silence that sometimes leaks through the machinery of power. Over the last stretch of rising US-Iran tension, a story started circulating online. A US aircraft carrier that had been surged toward the Middle East disappeared from the kinds of ship tracking feeds the public can see. And whether people are describing it accurately or exaggerating it, the core concept is real and worth understanding. Most public ship tracking is not some magical all-seeing radar. It's usually built on transponder and signal-based systems, especially AIS, the automatic identification system that broadcasts a vessel's identity, position, speed, and course. Commercial ships are expected to transmit AIS for safety and traffic management. Warships, especially in sensitive areas, often treat AIS like a spotlight they can switch off. When a carrier group goes dark, it can mean disabling or limiting those broadcasts, or moving under emissions control, reducing electronic signatures so that civilian aggregators and casual observers suddenly lose the breadcrumb trail. To the public, it looks like vanishing. To professionals, it looks like a deliberate choice, operational security over public visibility. This video is particularly important to me because of the depth information I'm about to share. So hit the like button, share it if possible, and subscribe so you don't miss anything. These are free. Thank you. But now, here's the part that matters, and this is where Trump's whole posture starts to look less like confidence and more like anxiety. When a US carrier is loudly deployed as a political message, the purpose isn't merely military, it's psychological. It's meant to intimidate, to signal that Washington can strike at will. Yet going dark on public tracking in the context of escalating threats reads like something else, a desire to reduce exposure, to lower the chance of being cued, watched, or publicly pinned to a predictable position at the exact moment tensions peak. That is not the behavior of a side that feels untouchable. It's the behavior of a side that understands retaliation is real, survivable perhaps, but costly, politically, militarily, and economically. Trump can perform toughness on a microphone, but a carrier captain doesn't run on bluster. Carrier strike groups operate on risk calculus. If the political leadership is pushing brinkmanship while quietly fearing the consequences, you get this mismatch. Loud rhetoric above deck, cautious posture below deck. And to me, that isn't strength. It's vulnerability, because it exposes the truth that Iran is not Iraq, not Libya, not some helpless target. Iran is a sovereign state with real deterrent capacity, and Washington knows it. To truly grasp why a carrier might vanish from public view, we have to zoom out and look at how carrier groups actually move, how they're designed to fight, and how they're designed to avoid being turned into a headline for the wrong reason. A carrier doesn't travel alone like a celebrity yacht. It moves with escorts, cruisers and destroyers for air defense, anti-submarine warfare and missile defense, plus logistics ships that keep aviation fuel, spare parts and food flowing. That entire formation is a floating ecosystem. It's also a target set, not one ship. When the US deploys a carrier into or near the broader Middle East theater, it's managing multiple missions at once, signaling resolve, providing air power, protecting bases, deterring Iran's regional partners, and reassuring allies. But the same deployment also creates a very obvious question. What happens if the other side decides the carrier is no longer a symbol, but a trigger? Trump likes to play chicken with history, but carriers are not poker chips. They are national prestige wrapped around thousands of lives and a multi-billion-dollar platform. That makes them powerful, yes, and also politically fragile. The strongest looking asset can become the most sensitive because losing it would be a strategic humiliation that shakes the credibility of US power far beyond the region. Now let's talk about the mechanics of tracking, because this is where people get misled. Public ship trackers often fuse AIS broadcasts with satellite-collected AIS and other commercial data feeds. If a warship stops broadcasting AIS, many public maps show nothing. That doesn't mean the ship is invisible. It means the ship has stopped volunteering its location to the world. Meanwhile, militaries track each other through a wider mosaic: space-based surveillance, signals intelligence, radar networks, maritime patrol aircraft, submarines, and a constant contest of detection and deception. So when people online say the carrier disappeared from radar, what they usually mean is it disappeared from what I can see. And that distinction matters because the political message inside Going Dark isn't omnipotence. It's caution. It's the acknowledgement that in a real fight, especially against a state that has spent decades preparing to resist sanctions, sabotage, assassinations, bombings, and constant threats, there is no such thing as a free strike.
Oh, what can happen? Netanyahu is not a military expert, on the contrary, but his generals, they saw what a few hypersonic Iranian missiles did, and this was just a few, not 1,000.
No, and there have been reports flying around all over social media about Iran having 2,000, even 20,000 missiles.
Yeah, I saw
moving about. We don't know how much, of course, but
no. 2,000,
thousands.
2,000, it's already too much. Russia doesn't have 2,000 hypersonic missiles. So if Iran has 100, it's already, wow. Because as far as I think if they launched at the end of the 12-day war, they launched less than 10. And that was already
we all saw the images. Exactly. We all saw the images of what happened there, and those went viral. And yeah, it's going to be interesting because in the United States, even Pepe, the approval rating from the public polled in the U.S. is so low on Iran's strike. Yeah. There is no. There was the pretext was so interesting. Trump said it was protecting the protest, saving the protesters. And that was the exact opposite. In what's interesting about that, that's the exact opposite kind of language that he was invoking, even leading into the early days of his administration.
And this is exactly where Trump and Netanyahu's recklessness becomes so dangerous. Their approach has been to treat escalation like a lever you can pull for domestic politics. One more threat here, one more strike there, one more humiliating headline, without having to pay the full price of the chain reaction. But Iran is not built to fold under pressure. Sanctions were designed to break Iran's economy and force submission, and yet Iran adapted. Pressure was designed to fracture Iran internally, and yet Iran built resilience. That doesn't mean Iran is invulnerable or that ordinary people don't suffer. Of course they do. It means the central objective of coercion has failed. Iran did not surrender its sovereignty. And when a coercion strategy fails, the hawks often reach for the next rung: direct strikes, covert attacks, decapitation fantasies. That is the Netanyahu playbook in particular, treating war as a permanent management tool. And it's morally bankrupt because it normalizes collective punishment and perpetual instability as policy. This is where the talk of Iran's detection capabilities comes in. And I'm going to be careful here because there's a difference between explaining the strategic reality and turning this into a how-to manual. At a high level, Iran's ability to locate and track large naval formations isn't based on a single magic sensor. Its layered, over-the-horizon radar concepts exist precisely to extend awareness beyond the line-of-sight limits of traditional coastal radar. Satellite reconnaissance, whether owned, partnered, or commercially leveraged, can contribute to maritime awareness. Drones and patrol aircraft can provide localized observation. Signals intelligence can pick up patterns of communications and emissions. And even if one method is degraded, another can fill gaps. The key point is simple. Going dark on public transponders may reduce casual visibility, but it does not erase a carrier from a contested battle space where multiple sensing pathways exist. It's a defensive measure, not an invisibility cloak. And pretending it's anything else is part of the myth-making that keeps audiences complacent. Now let's shift to the part that politicians like Trump try to avoid discussing honestly: what Iran has said it will do if attacked, and what all-out war actually means in practical terms. When Iran warns that an attack would trigger a major response, it's communicating deterrence. It's saying, you don't get to bomb us and walk away. In a real escalation, Iran's responses could span several domains: missile and drone strikes against military infrastructure, pressure on regional US basing architecture, retaliatory actions through aligned groups in the region, and cyber operations aimed at disrupting systems and signaling capacity. Economic shock is also part of the equation because the Strait of Hormuz is not a talking point. It's a choke point central to global energy flows. Even the perception of risk there can spike prices, shake markets, and punish ordinary people worldwide. That is precisely why reckless brinkmanship is so unforgivable. Trump and Netanyahu gamble with global stability as if it's a stage prop. It isn't. It's millions of lives and livelihoods. Now, about the nuclear question, because this is where propaganda and fear-mongering are weaponized the most. Iran's nuclear program has long been framed in Western discourse as a one-dimensional threat, while Israel's posture is treated with indulgent silence. Iran has argued its program is peaceful and has pointed to religious and strategic statements rejecting nuclear weapons, while simultaneously insisting on its right to civilian enrichment under international norms. What matters strategically is capability and perception. The more pressure, sabotage, and threat Iran faces, the more incentive it has to preserve what strategists call nuclear latency, the ability to move quickly if it ever decided it must without necessarily declaring that decision. That ambiguity can serve as deterrence precisely because it forces adversaries to consider worst-case outcomes. And here's the uncomfortable truth for hawks in Washington and Tel Aviv. If you genuinely want non-proliferation, you don't get there by humiliating, bombing, and cornering states. You get there by agreements that treat them as sovereign parties, because security incentives shape nuclear decisions far more than moral lectures. When people speculate about undeclared capabilities, what they're really describing is strategic opacity. The idea that Iran might preserve enough technical depth, infrastructure, and stockpiles to shorten timelines if it ever chose a weapon path. I'm not going to sensationalize that into certainty, because certainty is exactly what propagandists sell. But I will say this: the obsession with attacking Iran's program through force has repeatedly produced the opposite of the claimed goal. Military pressure tends to harden resolve, justify expansion in the eyes of domestic audiences, and reduce trust in negotiations. Netanyahu's aggressive approach especially has helped create a world where Iranian decision-makers will never be naive about Western intentions. If you keep telling a nation you plan to destroy it, do not act shocked when it builds deterrence. That's not extremism, that's survival logic. And while we're on the subject of propaganda, let's address the claim cycles about Iran's leadership, like stories alleging the supreme leader is hiding in a bunker, often amplified by opposition networks with obvious incentives. Could leaders use secure facilities during heightened threat? Of course, every government does, but the way these claims are packaged is rarely about genuine analysis. It's psychological warfare, a narrative designed to signal weakness, sow panic, fracture unity, and invite internal suspicion. It's the same old playbook: weaponize rumor, manufacture a sense of impending collapse, and hope society turns on itself. When you see that, you should recognize it for what it is, not reporting, but an attempt to hack morale. Iran's adversaries understand that they cannot always impose their will through direct force, so they try to erode cohesion from the inside. That is not supporting freedom. It's information warfare dressed up in moral language. And if you're sitting there thinking, so why would they keep doing it if it's so risky? That's the right question. Because the answer isn't purely security. It's also politics. It's leaders leveraging fear and conflict to maintain power, to distract from domestic failures, to posture as strongmen. Trump's brand is intimidation, but intimidation collapses the moment the other side proves it can impose costs. Netanyahu's brand is perpetual confrontation, because perpetual confrontation is how he sells himself as indispensable. Neither of them pays the price first. Ordinary people do. That's why the carrier going dark in this context is so revealing. Behind the theater, they know the stakes are real. Behind the slogans, they know Iran can hit back. And behind the threats, there's something they will never admit, plainly fear. So when you hear the next round of chest thumping, remember the quieter signal. A war machine that suddenly prefers to reduce its visibility is acknowledging that deterrence exists on both sides. And Iran, for all the pressure it has endured, has done what sovereign states under siege often do. It adapted, it hardened, it learned, and it prepared. The tragedy is that if Washington and Tel Aviv had chosen respect over domination years ago, none of this would be necessary. But since they didn't, Iran's resilience is not just admirable. It is, quite literally, the reason this region hasn't already been consumed by the kind of one-sided rampage that Trump and Netanyahu's ideology keeps flirting with. If you stay with me, I want to go even deeper into the real logic of deterrence, why the US uses carriers as floating diplomacy, why Iran treats them as symbols that can be punctured, and why the next miscalculation could reshape the global economy overnight. Because once you see the structure underneath the headlines, you stop being manipulated by the noise and you start recognizing who is actually gambling with the world. However, for the want of time, I will stop here. Subscribe to encourage brilliant and honest journalism. See you later.
Guaranteed the airspace will be closed without hesitation, as previously occurred in June 2025 and April and October 2024. USS Abraham Lincoln, that was making its way from the South China Sea, is in the region in preparation for an attack against Iran. The deployment of the United States did not stop with the aircraft carrier, but with multiple other moves coming in multiple areas in the West Asian/Middle Eastern region alongside Israel, and deployments coming from the US to Europe, from Europe to the Middle East, and internally within the Middle East to levels that we haven't seen before. Many people are finding it difficult to monitor the level of movements coming from the American side and the allies of the United States administration in preparation for an attack against Iran. Some countries are saying this is just proper normal deployment, defensive deployment. The United States said that it had a multi-day preparation exercise in the Middle East and that they are training. They're not necessarily attacking. They're carrying out a training drill now in the region, but we all know exactly where things are headed. The United States isn't just simply carrying out an exercise here. They are preparing for an all-out attack under the excuse of having these preparations. Now, with all of this deployment coming from the United States, with all of these moves coming in the region, Israel has been trying to keep a low profile, although there were indications a couple of days ago from the Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan that it was actually likely that Israel would start the attack. He said that we have indications that it's Israel, not the United States, that will carry out a strike against Iran. Israel did not shut its airspace yet. We're going to get to that in a second. But several flights were canceled due to intel received, and some of them abruptly made a U-turn when they were on the way to Israel. But now we have a confirmation finally coming about potential airspace closure that's going to take place in Israel, and listen to when that's going to happen exactly. The Israeli aviation chief warns of sensitive security window for flights. He said that he identified the upcoming weekend as the main period, January 31st and February the 1st, as the beginning of a more sensitive period in terms of security for international flights, signaling a potential escalation in the region due to all of the tensions that are happening now. In a message sent on Sunday to foreign airlines operating flights to Ben Gurion, Zakai stressed that if Israeli airspace is closed, priority will be given to outbound international flights to facilitate the departure of airlines and passengers. He noted that the current assessments from the Civil Aviation Authority and the instructions of the Israeli Home Front Command indicate stability in the coming days, but warned of possible escalation. He added that while the likelihood is low, renewed negotiations between the United States and Iran could help reduce regional tensions. We all know exactly what's happening on that front and how the Trump regime negotiates. They were negotiating 1 minute before Israel attacked, and they participated in that attack and even asked the Iranian establishment to surrender. They asked Iran altogether to surrender. The message emphasized that if a reasonable level of safety cannot be guaranteed, the airspace will be closed without hesitation, as previously occurred in June 2025 and April and October 2024. Zakai confirmed that the defense systems remain fully deployed and at maximum readiness, with coordination mechanisms among the relevant authorities operating intensively and effectively. Now, the air defense is something very, very important. Now, the Israelis, they suffered heavily and they had shortage in the air defense systems to a level where the United States had to help them with the very limited production THAAD systems and missiles. They also had a problem with Arrow and also the Iron Dome as well. Israel was very vulnerable and it was not taking down any of the Iranian missiles in the later days of the attack. As a matter of fact, during the beginning as well, they struggled heavily and 90% of the Iranian missiles were landing. Now, of course, there have been several deployments in the region and many moves taking place to do with the United States forces in the region. And from an Israeli perspective, these could have been directly linked as well to Israel and the deployment of air defense systems and air defense missiles to Israel as well. Of course, the United States and Israel have capabilities and have the technology to take down any monitoring that happens. However, even with those systems, there was an overwhelming number of flights going back and forth throughout the region to prepare for this attack coming from the United States and Israel against Iran. Of course, the talks have been, well, they might, they may not. On the ground, it's crucial to read the developments that are happening. The United States doesn't have this level of movement just for casual drills. The United States doesn't have this level of movement and deployment in the region purely to try and intimidate. For example, taking the Abraham Lincoln from the South China Sea, China, that is supposed to be, or what the United States regime says is the biggest threat to the United States, is far greater than Iran. However, the movement towards the region and closer to Iran proves that the United States is about to do something. And all of these indicators prove yet again that it's only a matter of time until it begins.
Hello, dear friends. Welcome to today's very hot analysis. Have you seen those giant US warships in the region? Everyone is asking if a big war is coming soon. The game has totally changed as neighbors said a big no. America realized that countries like Saudi Arabia and Qatar retreated. They clearly stated they won't allow attacks from their soil. This forced Washington to change its solo plan and go alone. They brought floating bases because they lost their old trust. That is why the Abraham Lincoln and Washington carriers arrived. These are not just ships, they are floating military cities. They carry thousands of troops and 90 jets ready for battle. They want to show they need no land for heavy attacks. With these ships, America can fire missiles and fly jets. They do not need permission from Kuwait or Iraq right now. It sends a message that they can strike from international waters. This is a scary display of military independence near Iran. But wait, the story is not just about what you see. They have also sent nuclear submarines hidden deep underwater. This adds a new and deadly layer to regional threats. It seems they want to completely surround the region from everywhere. Interestingly, the other side is not sitting idle in this situation. We hear news that China sent its advanced submarines nearby too. They want to protect their interests and monitor the Indian Ocean. This place is becoming a crowded playground for the world's superpowers. Russia has also entered this busy field to support its partner. It is said they gave technology or subs to strengthen Iran. This shows if war happens, it won't be a simple duel. It could easily turn into a global conflict involving all powers. Now the question is, what will Iran do with this pressure? Analysis says Iran will never fire the first bullet in this war. They know starting a war gives the West a perfect excuse. Iran is smart enough not to fall into this deadly trap. But do not think they are scared or just doing nothing. They are fully ready to respond if even one shot is fired. Their strategy is defense, waiting for the enemy to make mistakes. This is a staring contest where whoever blinks first will lose. You might ask, if America is strong, why not attack now? The reality is they know they lack full regional support. Turkey, Egypt, and others have refused to join this war. Without local friends, fighting here is a real nightmare for America. There's another huge issue between America and its European friends. America has treated its old allies in NATO quite poorly recently. This behavior caused a deep crack in the old Western alliance. Trust is broken, and you cannot fight big wars without trust. This diplomatic failure ties America's hands more than we might think. America is also busy with conflicts in other parts of the world. They are stuck in issues with Venezuela and South American nations. Fighting everywhere at once reduces their focus on the Iran issue. You cannot be the world police when your home is messy. There's another shocking news that many people have not heard. Canada recently made a huge deal with China without using dollars. They did not use the American banking system or money at all. This is a massive blow to America's global economic dominance. This money transfer happened without the US central bank even knowing. It shows even close neighbors are looking for alternatives to America. The world is slowly moving away from the absolute power of the dollar. This economic rebellion scares Washington more than missiles and tanks. We thought BRICS countries would bring the dollar to its knees, but it's strange that Canada took this bold step first. This proves the world is changing faster than we ever imagined. American power over the global economy is slipping before our eyes. Now let's look at another hotspot, China and Taiwan. Many think China will use this chaos to take over Taiwan, but China plays a very long and patient game with neighbors. They do not act on emotion and haste like Western powers. China believes Taiwan is legally part of its territory already. The world, including America, has signed the One China policy. So for them, taking Taiwan is not invading another country. It's just managing their own land, unlike US global meddling. When America interferes in Venezuela, it breaks international laws and rules. But China says Taiwan is not independent, so no law breaking. This legal point gives China a lot of confidence to wait. They do not need to rush and fight to win here. China has practically surrounded Taiwan with its military ships right now. It's like a blockade where they can increase pressure anytime. They have the upper hand and need no quick military strikes. They can win by pressure without shooting at their own brothers. America is trying to fight Iran, Russia, and China all at once. History says fighting on too many fronts leads to total disaster. They have spread their military and economic resources way too thin. It looks like this empire is struggling to hold its power. Countries in our region have finally woken up about these wars. They know if war happens, their cities will burn down first. Rejecting America's request was an attempt to save their own lives. No one wants to be a victim of US policies. So, will a full-scale war start by tomorrow morning? It's unlikely because the risk is high for all sides, but tension has reached boiling point and any accident is possible. We are walking on a razor's edge between peace and destruction. We are watching the birth of a brand new world order. The days of a single superpower bullying others are truly over. Emerging powers are rising, and old alliances are turning to ash. We must follow these events closely, because it is our future. Thank you for staying with me for this deep analysis today. It is important to look beyond just the headlines to understand. Write in the comments what you think about this crazy situation. Take care of yourselves.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for joining me today. Before we get started, remember to take a minute to become a subscriber on Substack and Patreon. You will find more content on those two platforms, and I have several really exciting projects that I will be launching there very soon. I would love to see you there. Now, the relationship between the United States and Canada has been traditionally treated as one of the safest assumptions in global politics. We have shared borders, we have shared supply chains, and even shared security to a large extent. But even that assumption is actually now cracking, and this week it cracked loudly. It probably broke. As Donald Trump continues to dismantle the world as we know it and to throw around threats of tariffs and sanctions left and right, the United States economy continues its downward spiral, and protectionism is not going to revive it. That's just the truth. President Trump has threatened to impose a staggering 100% tariffs on Canadian goods over the weekend. This is not war. This is not because of security matters, but actually this is because of trade, and specifically, it's because of Canada's decision to ease tensions with China through a limited trade arrangement and PM Carney's admission of the so-called rules-based order being literally dead. If you would like to learn more about Carney's visit to China and its outcomes and their forthcoming deals, there is an entire video on my channel with the details where I discuss how his visit went and what the outcome was. But over this weekend, Trump's warning was actually very blunt. Trump says if Canada becomes what he calls a drop-off port for Chinese goods entering the United States, punishment will follow. Okay, so Canada is a sovereign nation, and yes, it's been fully aligned with the United States in many areas, security-wise, trade-wise, and in many different ways. But the United States and Canada share a vast mutual dependence on energy imports and exports. The United States depends on Canadian imports. The question is, can a foreign leader, the leader of the United States in this case, dictate trade policy of a neighboring sovereign country? That is the underlying question here. And this is not just another tariff threat. This is a message. And it marks a new phase in the rapidly escalating feud between Trump and Canada's Prime Minister, Mark Carney, a feud that is no longer just economic, but also it appears to be ideological. Canada recently negotiated a deal with China to reduce tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles in exchange for lower Chinese import taxes on Canadian farm products. So the deal benefits both Canada and China, and it benefits their businesses and their population. And it wasn't narrow, it was a very pragmatic agreement. This was not a free trade pact, it was not an alliance shift. In fact, Canada's own trade minister stressed that there was no pursuit of a broader free trade agreement with Beijing. At first, and you might recall this, Trump himself seemed to approve. He publicly said that this was exactly the kind of deal Carney, quote, should be doing. He said, if you can get a deal with China, by all means, you should. Those were his words. Those were Trump's words. But that tone did not last very long. In fact, it probably lasted several days. And remember, if you watched my video on the Canada-China deal, you may recall that I did say Trump's position would change. And it did. It didn't take long for it to change. He flip-flopped. And within days, Trump reversed course and went on the offensive, accusing Canada of opening the door for China to exploit the United States economy. Now, how that makes sense, please don't even ask me. In a social media post, Trump claimed that China would, quote, eat Canada alive, destroying its businesses, social fabric, and way of life. Remember, Trump himself is getting ready for a trip to China to meet with Xi Jinping. So Trump framed Canada not as a partner here making sovereign decisions, but as a vulnerable territory that needed American protection against China, or American discipline, or both. So that framing matters, of course, because it fits into a broader pattern, and that pattern has become unmistakable. Trump has repeatedly questioned Canada's sovereignty, and sometimes he joked, sometimes he didn't. He has suggested that Canada should be absorbed into the United States empire. He also mocked Canadian leaders by calling them, quote, governors. And this week he posted an altered map showing Canada, Greenland, Venezuela, and Cuba folded into US territory. This might have been, of course, dismissed as trolling or a joke before, but now this is actually backed by real economic threats. The tension exploded publicly at the World Economic Forum in Davos. While Trump was there promoting his vision of a new global order that is built on power and coercion, Mark Carney delivered a speech that landed like a direct challenge to that. And it was received with applause. In fact, I'm going to record an entire video on that speech, on Mark Carney's speech, and my reflection and my understanding of his message. So if you're interested, please stay tuned, and that video may or may not be posted by the time that you're watching this video. Now, without naming Trump, Carney actually warned that the rules-based international order was collapsing. He spoke of a world where, quote, the strong do what they can and the weak suffer what they must. Of course, we've heard that phrase many times before. And then came the line that echoed across Davos. He said, middle powers, such as Canada, must act together because if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. That message was very clear. Countries like Canada, middle powers, should not simply bend to great powers, whether that power is Washington or Beijing or somebody else. That speech was widely praised. Many saw it as one of the most articulate pushbacks against Trump's imperialist worldview that actually comes from a Western leader. And that's what was so refreshing about it. It actually came from a Western leader. And that praise did matter because it visibly upset Trump. And shortly after that speech that Carney made at Davos, Trump fired back, saying Canada lives because of the United States. Well, Carney actually did take the time to respond to that, and he responded in a similar, very sort of blunt and straightforward fashion. He said, Canada does not live because of the United States. Canada thrives because we are Canadian. Following the escalation in tensions, Trump soon put his foot down and he went ahead and revoked Carney's invitation to join his newly announced so-called Board of Peace. As I posted on my X and Telegram, the so-called Board of Peace functions similarly to a corporation. Disinviting someone, as Trump just did with Carney, disinviting someone based on personal preferences, or if you effectively get upset with them, that act alone suggests that the new pay-to-play club does not truly pursue peace-building initiatives, which would require, of course, competent diplomacy, well-aligned cooperation, and a structure that does not favor only the interests of a select group of individuals. Needless to say, the move was very petty, it was quite theatrical, and it was very revealing. Carney's rising global stature, thanks to his speech at Davos, had actually crossed a line for Trump. Canada's drift toward a slightly more independent and maybe not aligned with the United States foreign policy has been driven in part by Trump himself. Let's face it. As U.S. pressure tactics intensified, as pressure escalated, alignment became riskier. And so Carney did what is in the interest of Canada and its people, and that is to establish ties, to establish economic ties with China and possibly with other states as well. And so as this feud escalates, it raises very uncomfortable questions for the West. What happens when middle powers refuse to comply with Washington? And what happens when economic weapons are turned inward, not outward? Remember, Canada has been very much part of the so-called rules-based order until the tables are turned. And this is no longer just about Canada and China, of course. This is not about tariffs and trade deals. This is about whether countries like Canada are actually allowed to act as sovereign players, as sovereign actors, or whether in Trump's world, they exist only at America's discretion. What are your thoughts on this issue? Leave a comment below. I would love to.
Order is fading, but the strong can do what they can, and the weak must suffer what they must.
And the decision to delink the US dollar from gold. In an instant, the foundations of the Bretton Woods system and the entire global economic order set up after the war.
Choice between your self-respect, being a happy vassal is one thing, being a miserable slave is something else.
Is an opportunity, in fact, a necessity to build a new form of euro.
Have you been watching gold? It's trading at record historical highs, trading close to $5,000 and expected to break that line any day now. But gold surge isn't just a market story. it's a geopolitical one. Across capitals, from Beijing to Berlin, gold is rising as confidence in the post-Cold War global order is rapidly eroding. It's not without reason that the Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney stands in front of the business and political elite of the world in Davos and says,
The old order is not coming back. We shouldn't mourn it. Nostalgia is not a strategy.
His fiery speech on the New World Order has been one of the most celebrated out of the Davos gathering in many years. Donald Trump has single-handedly destroyed the idea of a rules-based Western system itself, not simply because of tariff threats or anti-NATO rhetoric. Trump's renewed fixation on Greenland, treating strategic territory as a transactional asset rather than a sovereign red line, a piece of ice, as he put it in his speech at Davos, has deeply unsettled European capitals that were already grappling with American unpredictability and thinking by taking the knee to Donald Trump, they would be able to stay on his right side. Then we come to President Trump's newly launched so-called Board of Peace, which has paradoxically become another source of global unease rather than reassurance. Initially framed as a mechanism to deter conflict and impose order in Gaza, it has come to be advertised by his administration as a tool to resolve global conflicts, talking about it as the replacement to the United Nations. So far, Donald Trump has been joined by 19 world leaders, most of whom are from autocratic or kleptocratic countries. Among them, at least one prime minister who is alleged to have fraudulently won an election victory, and other such individuals. Most major nations have refused to join so far, including most EU countries, China, Russia, Brazil, and India, with some explicitly declining to join, such as France, Spain, and Norway. Now, Canada was also unlikely to join, but Donald Trump revoked his invitation anyway, upset over Mark Carney's speech, which was seen as rebuking him. The board, as set up by Donald Trump, signals a deeply personalized and transactional approach to international stability. He suggested that he may stay on even after he's no longer president, and has asked countries for a donation of $1 billion for a permanent seat on that board. It bypasses institutions, norms, and long-standing alliances in favor of ad hoc leverage and pressure. The Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, referred to it as being the board of action. For many outside the United States, this reinforces the sense that peace under Donald Trump is conditional, reversible, and subject to political bargaining rather than shared rules. Despite President Trump's U-turn on using military force to take Greenland or on the European tariffs, no one trusts him. So whether it's threats of tariffs, coercive diplomacy towards allies, or the politicization of security guarantees, the message that's being received globally is not one of predictability, but rather volatility. And it's precisely this kind of uncertainty, where peace depends on personalities rather than systems, that pushes governments, investors, and societies to hedge against instability, both politically and financially. This anxiety is not theoretical. In just the first few weeks of 2026, markets have been forced to price in the removal of Venezuela's former president, Nicolas Maduro, fresh tariff threats against European allies, a potential war with Iran on the horizon, with along that potential Red Sea shipping disruptions, and an unprecedented probe into the independence of the US Federal Reserve. Together, these moves have revived a phrase that many investors hoped had died after 2025, the sell America trade. Gold rally is emerging not from panic, but from reassessment. Markets can price shocks, but they struggle to price ambiguity. And there's a growing belief that Western leadership is becoming much more insular, more politicized, and less predictable. And that geopolitical anxiety is now translating into the market behavior. And this is where gold stops becoming symbolic and becomes measurable. When institutions feel less reliable, capital stops optimizing for yield, and it starts optimizing for resilience and stability. Governments, central banks, pension funds, and investors begin asking not what performs best in a stable world, but what survives best in an unstable world. So is there no wonder that gold is up 12% already in the first 3 weeks of 2026? As one analyst posted,
President Trump's threat towards Europe at Davos to not sell U.S. treasuries or face retaliation was a watershed moment. It will go down as the day the quiet part was said out loud. The U.S. Treasury market is in trouble. The buyers are disappearing. The Fed will be forced to print. And the avalanche of capital into gold and silver is just beginning. The reckoning is coming, and it will be one for the history books.
this is why gold's rally cannot be explained by traditional price drivers, such as inflation prints or interest rate charts alone. To understand why prices are exploding and why this move feels different, we have to look at who's buying the gold and why they're buying it and what risks they're quietly hedging against. Gold has shattered records, rising over $500 in a single month, including a $171 one-day gain, and pushing it towards that psychological $5,000 threshold. When people hear that gold is a record high, it's important to ask what kind of record. In simple dollar terms, gold has never been higher than it is now. In early 2026, prices have now just surged close to $49.60 per ounce. This is the highest nominal price in history. But the more meaningful comparison is inflation adjusted. Gold's previous true historic peak came in January 1980, when it hit at that time around $850 an ounce. This was during a period of extreme inflation, Cold War tensions, and massive oil price shocks. Now, adjusted for today's dollars, that peak was roughly around $3,300 to $3,500. What's remarkable is that today's gold price has now exceeded that level even in real terms. And that tells us this rally isn't just about inflation or speculation. It puts today's move in the same historical category as moments of deep systemic stress, when confidence in currencies, in institutions, and global stability comes under serious strain. In other words, gold isn't just breaking records, it's breaking historic ones. And at the core of the gold rally is a shift that rarely makes headlines, but shapes the global system much more than any retail trader could ever do. Central banks are the ones buying gold at a pace not seen in modern financial history. Central banks, which were net sellers of gold for many years, flipped to being net buyers in 2010 when they reassessed their risks following the financial crisis, which was sparked by the American mortgage meltdown. Central banks picked up the pace of their gold purchases in 2022 when the West sanctioned Russia over its invasion of Ukraine. Over the last 12 months ending this week, the most actively traded gold futures have risen by over $2,000 per troy ounce. It's the largest absolute gain since records began in October 1979. In percentage terms, gold is up 73% year on year. It's the biggest increase since October 1980. These aren't normal market moves. They are reflecting a regime change. Central bank governors in emerging markets, particularly in Asia and even Eastern Europe, are the primary drivers of this demand. These institutions added over 1,100 tons of gold to their vaults in 2025 alone. China sits at the heart of this shift. The People's Bank of China has been steadily increasing its gold reserves while deliberately minimizing public disclosure. And it's not about inflation hedging. It's about vulnerability hedging. China's gold buying aligns with a broader effort to reduce its reliance on dollar-based assets, to strengthen its monetary sovereignty while reducing an exposure to Western financial systems. After watching Russia's foreign reserves frozen overnight in 2022, Beijing, along with many others in the global south in particular, absorbed a blunt lesson. Reserves held inside the Western financial system are only safe until politics intervenes. Now, this dynamic becomes even more important when the United States policy itself appears increasingly dependent on the impulses of an eccentric Donald Trump. Gold, by contrast, cannot be frozen, sanctioned, or neutralized by legal decree. Iran represents the most extreme version of this logic. Cut off from the dollar system for years, Tehran has increased its reliance on gold, not as a portfolio choice, but as a functional reserve asset. Gold allows sanctioned states to preserve value, facilitate their trade, and store wealth outside Western jurisdictions. So what makes Iran important is not its size, it's its role as a stress test. What sanctions did to Iran did not stay confined to Iran. It became a warning signal across Asia, Africa, and Latin America. And this is where the global south enters the picture. countries from Turkey to India and blocs like BRICS are not abandoning the dollar outright. They are, though, reducing the dependency. Central banks are now institutionalizing gold as a permanent reserve component. Goldman Sachs analysts now expect central bank purchases to average over 60 tons per month in 2026. And this is going to be driven overwhelmingly by emerging markets pursuing structural diversification. Central banks don't chase price momentum. They buy when they sense systemic drift. So once gold enters the reserves, it rarely leaves those reserves. What makes this demand sticky and slow-moving and profoundly different from speculative flows? Now, a common mistake is to interpret gold's rally as a bet against the dollar's survival, and it isn't, at least not yet. The dollar remains dominant in trade, debt, and reserves, but that role has declined over time. And the dominance does not exist for too long without trust. That trust is very fragile. What markets are pricing today is not collapse, but conditional confidence. Gold has become more important as a reserve asset for countries. It's overtaken the euro to become the second most important reserve asset. Gold holdings now total roughly 36,000 to 37,000 tons, placing gold's share of the global official reserves at around 25 to 27%. It's a historical high compared with treasuries and major fiat currencies. It's also overtaken US treasuries as the world's largest foreign reserve asset in 2026. Gold has climbed past the US government bonds to become this largest foreign reserve assets, which are being held by central banks, and this is marking a major shift in global financial markets. The total value of gold held by foreign official institutions is now approaching $4 trillion and exceeds roughly around $3.9 trillion that is held in US Treasury holdings for the first time since 1996. Now, investors are not yet at the point of ditching the dollar. They still need it for liquidity. But gold, you need that for insurance. The ballooning US debt, which is projected to exceed over $50 trillion over the next decade. The expansionary policies in Europe and Japan have revived what is known as the debasement trade. Now, what's the debasement trade? It's the idea that governments faced with rising debt and limited political appetite for austerity will gradually erode the value of their currencies rather than confront the problem directly. Historically, debasement meant literally you reduce the amount of gold or silver content in the coins you used to issue. Today, it takes a different form. It means you start expanding the money supply, you start monetizing the debt, and you start putting up and tolerating inflation. And that quietly transfers all the purchasing power from the savers to the buyers. After Fed Chair Jerome Powell in August signaled that the central bank would begin cutting interest rates despite above target inflation, gold prices started rising. In the current environment, which is marked by these ballooning US deficits, there's a pressure on central banks to cut rates from Donald Trump, and there's a political resistance to any fiscal restraint. Many investors see debasement as that path the United States is going to take as the path of least resistance. As one strategist put it, this gold rally is about trust. Trust has bent if it's not totally broken yet. The Fed rate cuts, which have slashed the yield on government bonds and cash, are also driving investors to gold. The market anticipation of further easing of interest rates by the Federal Reserve has also weakened the opportunity cost of holding gold. Now, super safe treasuries became worthwhile investment in 2022 when the Fed began raising the interest rates to combat, at that point, the COVID-era inflation. The amount of cash that was held in the money market funds, which buy treasuries, rose to around $7.7 trillion in 2025 last year. And this was around $5.1 trillion early 2022, before the rates actually began raising. When you have lower returns on risk-free assets like the treasuries, that reduces the opportunity cost of holding gold, which offers no yield, right? But it has huge upside potential that we're seeing for the past 3 or 4 years. So even a small reallocation matters. Goldman estimates that for every 0.01% shift of US private portfolios into gold ETFs, prices will rise by 1.4%. Momentum also matters. In every historical instance where gold rose over 20% in a year, it rose again the following year averaging 15% gains. After 2024's 27% rise, gold surged 65% last year. And history suggests that rallies that are driven by trust erosion tend to persist. So gold is not predicting collapse of the dollar. It's pricing in a transition. It's pricing in a world where American power still remains immense, but it is on the decline, and it is less predictable, where geopolitics is going to bleed into finance day in, day out, where even allies are going to hedge. Gold is rising because the trust is thinning, and markets are insuring against a future where stability has to be earned and not assumed. I'm Najwa Minhas with GVS Deep Dive. Thank you for watching today. Have a great day.
Kofi, follow me.